The multiverse is a tapestry of infinite realities, each governed by its own immutable laws. In one universe, hell itself learned to fear a single name, a warrior who turned damnation into his hunting ground, who made demons pray for death they would never receive. In another universe, immortal species waged secret wars in the shadows of humanity, vampires and werewolves locked in cycles of blood and vengeance that spanned centuries. These worlds were never meant to touch, but when hell's ambition exceeded its grasp, when the legions of the damned sought new dimensions to corrupt, they tore a hole between realities. And through that wound in existence, they brought their worst nightmare with them. The rift opened above the Carpathian Mountains on a winter night when the temperature had dropped to -15 Celsius. The Eastern Coven's fortress, a converted medieval monastery that had sheltered vampires for 400 years, sat nestled in a valley of snow-covered pines. Inside its stone walls, 63 death dealers maintained their vigil, monitoring Lycan movements across Eastern Europe through satellite feeds and informant networks. They were the remnants of an ancient order, survivors of the war that had claimed Victor, Marcus, and Amelia. They endured because they were careful, because they stayed hidden, because they had learned from the mistakes that destroyed the old covens. None of that would save them. The sky split open at 11:47 p.m. Not gradually. There was no warning shimmer, no mystical buildup of energy. Reality simply tore, a vertical slash of crimson light that burned against the darkness like a wound in the fabric of existence. The breach measured 30 meters across, and through it poured things that should not exist in any sane universe. Imps, hunched demonic creatures with flesh like molten rock, scrambled through first, their claws scrabbling against the monastery's tile roof. Behind them came something worse. A hell knight, 3 meters of armored demonic muscle, its roar shaking snow from the pine trees. The death dealers responded with the precision of warriors who had fought for centuries. UV ammunition blazed from the ramparts. Silver-backed rounds followed. They had faced Lycans in their hundreds, had survived Marcus Corvinus himself in his rabid elder form. They were fast, trained, and lethal. Against demons from another dimension, they lasted 40 seconds. The imps tore through the courtyard like rabid animals, their clawed hands ripping through Kevlar and flesh with equal ease. The Hell Knight smashed through the reinforced doors as if they were cardboard, its fists pulping vampire skulls inside their helmets. Death dealers who had survived 2 centuries of war died screaming, UV rounds doing nothing to creatures that had never feared sunlight. Silver useless against flesh forged in Hell's foundries. Then the Slayer came through. He didn't step through the portal. He exploded from it, boots hitting the monastery roof hard enough to crack the ancient tiles. The Praetor's suit's argent energy tracings pulsed with dull crimson light, casting bloody shadows across the snow. In his hands, the super shotgun, lovingly maintained instrument of demon extinction, caught the moonlight. His visor reflected the carnage below. Demons slaughtering vampires, the blood painting the snow in patterns he'd seen 1,000,000,000 times across Hell's infinite landscape. The familiar rage ignited, that old, eternal, beautiful hatred. A Hell Knight looked up at him, ichor still dripping from its jaws where it had bitten through a death dealer's throat. It recognized him. They always did, eventually. Some primal instinct coded into demonic DNA, a warning that every creature of hell carried. This one is death. This one is the end. The Slayer dropped 20 feet and landed on the Hell Knight's shoulders. The impact drove the demon face first into the cobblestones, with enough force to shatter the ancient rock. Before it could rise, gauntleted hands gripped its horns. One savage twist, and the Hell Knight's neck snapped with a sound like a tree trunk splitting. The Slayer wrenched its head completely around, on vertebrae tearing through demonic flesh. The creature dissolved into ash and sulfur. 3 imps leapt at him from different angles, classic Hell tactics, the coordinated assault pattern he'd seen 10 million times before. The super shotgun barked twice. The first imp became red mist. The second lost everything above its ribcage. The third got close enough to slash at his armor before the Slayer caught its wrist mid-swing, reversed the momentum, and used the creature's own claws to disembowel it. It hit the ground in 2 pieces, already disintegrating. The surviving death dealers, 12 of them pressed against the monastery's inner wall, stared at this new arrival. They saw the armor, angular and advanced beyond any human technology. They saw the weapons, brutal and efficient. They saw the methodical slaughter and the mechanical precision with which this armored figure dismantled demons that had butchered their coven in seconds. Thomas, an elder vampire who had walked the earth for 300 years, found his voice. "Fall back, everyone inside now!" The Slayer's helmet turned toward the movement. Motion, fast motion. His targeting systems, ancient technology fused with his enhanced perception, tracked 12 figures retreating into the monastery's depths. Analysis took microseconds. Humanoid, rapid movement, enhanced physiology, aggressive energy signatures. His hand moved to the combat shotgun maglocked to his back. The vampires moved with supernatural speed, blurring across the courtyard. To human eyes, they would have been invisible. To the Slayer, who had tracked cacodemons in flight and archviles mid-teleport, and they might as well have been standing still. The combat shotgun came up. His finger touched the trigger. Then the rift pulsed. A surge of demonic energy, the familiar signature of hell preparing another wave. Priority shift. Instantaneous, automatic. The escaping figures weren't attacking. The portal was. Demons first, always demons first. He turned back to the Crimson Tear in reality and pulled a weapon from his back mount. The BFG 9000, Hell's own technology turned against its makers, hummed to life with a sound like reality groaning. The massive rifle's core ignited with green energy so bright it painted the entire valley in sickly emerald light. He aimed at the portal's center, where shapes were already forming for the second wave. The trigger pull was gentle. The result was apocalyptic. A sphere of pure, argent energy erupted from the barrel, moving deceptively slow as it drifted toward the rift. When it reached the portal's edge, it detonated. The blast was silent for the first microsecond. Then came the sound, a bass note that shook the mountains and shattered every window in the monastery. The green energy consumed everything within 50 meters of the portal. Demons still forming, the rift itself, sections of the roof, empty air. The demonic gateway collapsed inward, reality sealing itself with a thunderclap that echoed across the Carpathians. Then silence. Snow drifted down through the smoke. The courtyard was a crater, rubble and demon ash mixing with century-old stone. The portal was gone. The demons were gone. But the vampires, those fast-moving figures his systems had tagged, were still here, hiding inside the fortress. The Slayer's armor shifted as he breathed. His heads-up display showed no demonic signatures. 0. Clean sweep. But his motion tracker painted 12 contacts inside the building, heartbeats elevated, heat signatures hiding in darkness. Not demons, not from hell. But they looked wrong, moved wrong. That speed, that energy signature. In his experience, anything that moved like that hid in darkness, that fled from him, he'd killed entire species for less. The super shotgun's loading mechanism clicked as he chambered fresh shells. The sound echoed across the destroyed courtyard, a promise and a warning. The barrel swung toward the monastery's shattered entrance, toward the darkness where the survivors had retreated. Inside, Thomas pressed against the wall beside a window, watching through the centuries-old reflex that had kept him alive through the endless war. He saw the armored figure walking toward them, slow and deliberate, weapons ready. Saw the absolute efficiency with which it had slaughtered demons that had nearly destroyed their entire coven. Saw something in its posture, a predator's patience, a hunter's certainty. "What is that thing?" whispered Maria, a death dealer barely 60 years old, her voice shaking. Thomas had no answer. In 300 years, he had seen humans develop from swords to nuclear weapons, had watched the Lycan War evolve through a dozen technological revolutions, had witnessed Marcus Corvinus in his final, maddened form. This was different. This was something outside the natural order of their world, something that killed with a precision that transcended mere skill. And this was purpose-made flesh, violence distilled to its purest form. "Whatever it is," Thomas said quietly, watching the figure reach the entrance, "it just saved our lives." "Then why?" Maria asked. "Is it still coming?" The Slayer crossed the threshold. His visor scanned the darkness, thermal imaging painting 12 figures in shades of blue and red. They had stopped retreating. They were watching him, waiting. His armor's speakers crackled, and for the first time since arriving in this reality, sound came from the helmet. Not words. He had no words left, hadn't spoken in eons. Just a sound, processed through the suit's vocoder. A low, mechanical growl that held no humanity, no mercy, no negotiation. The message was clear in every universe, in every dimension, in every reality where predator and prey existed. "I am coming." And in the darkness of the monastery, 63 death dealers had become 12. And the night, which had already delivered demons from hell itself, had delivered something worse. Something that hunted demons. Something that might not recognize the difference between vampire and demon at all. If you want to see more crossover battles and unexpected universe collisions, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and universe you'd want to see in the comments below. Let's explore the infinite together. The monastery's interior was a maze of Gothic architecture and modern surveillance equipment. Centuries of vampire habitation layered like geological strata. Thomas led the survivors deeper into the complex, through stone corridors lit by emergency lighting that cast everything in shades of red. Behind them, the sound of boots on stone, heavy, measured, relentless, not pursuing, stalking. "The vault," Thomas commanded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Everyone to the vault now." They moved with the fluid grace of their species, centuries of predatory instinct guiding them through familiar territory. But the death dealers were fracturing, their legendary discipline crumbling under the weight of what they'd witnessed. Maria kept glancing back, her hand white-knuckled on her pistol grip. Victor, named for the fallen elder, a cruel irony tonight, had actually drawn his silver-backed combat knife, as if cold steel would matter against something that had vaporized a dimensional rift. The vault door was 20th century engineering applied to medieval paranoia. 6 inches of reinforced steel with UV-based locking mechanisms designed to withstand Lycan sieges and rival coven assaults. Thomas punched the code with fingers that had stopped shaking 3 centuries ago, but trembled now. The door groaned open on hydraulics, revealing the armory beyond. Racks of weapons, ammunition, the accumulated firepower of 400 years. 11 death dealers filed inside. Thomas remained at the threshold, ancient instincts warring with cold logic. The armored figure had killed demons, had closed the rift, had arguably saved them from total annihilation. but the way it moved made the mechanical inevitability of its approach triggered something deeper than logic in Thomas's predatory hindbrain. "Elder Thomas," Maria urged from inside the vault. "Please." He stepped inside. The door began to swing closed, 3 tons of steel moving on well-oiled tracks. Through the narrowing gap, Thomas caught a glimpse of the corridor beyond, empty, shadows dancing in the emergency lighting. Then, in the instant before the door sealed, a figure appeared at the corridor's end, just standing there, watching, waiting. The vault door slammed shut with a sound like a coffin lid. Thomas engaged the locks, mechanical tumblers, electronic deadbolts, UV activation sequences designed to kill anything that tried to breach them. Outside, silence, complete and total silence. "How long can we hold?" Victor asked, his knife still drawn, in useless comfort against an unknown threat. Thomas walked to the weapons rack, selecting an assault rifle loaded with UV rounds, the most powerful vampire-killing ammunition their species had developed. Against Lycans? Weeks. Against another coven? Days. He checked the rifle's chamber with the practiced ease of someone who'd fought in every major conflict since the 30 Years' War. Against that, I have no idea. "It killed the demons," Maria said, desperate hope in her voice. "Maybe it's on our side?" "It killed the demons," Thomas agreed. "Then it came for us." The vault's monitoring system was still active, feeds from cameras throughout the monastery displaying on screens mounted to the stone walls. Thomas cycled through them. The destroyed courtyard, demon ash mixing with snow, the great hall, empty, the armory level, clear, the main corridor outside the vault. The armored figure stood 3 meters from the vault door. It hadn't kicked the door down, hadn't fired weapons, hadn't even touched it. Just stood there, facing the entrance, utterly motionless. The camera angle caught its reflection in polished steel. Angular armor inscribed with symbols that hurt to look at too long. Weapons mag-locked to its back that belonged to no human military. A helmet with a single horizontal visor that glowed with dull crimson light. "What is it doing?" someone whispered. Thomas had no answer. In the feeds, the figure remained perfectly still for 10 seconds. 20, 30. Then its hand moved, not fast, not threatening, just purposeful, to its back mount. It withdrew a weapon, blocky, industrial, with a rotating barrel mechanism that looked like it belonged on a vehicle-mounted minigun. The chainsaw. The armored figure took 1 step forward. 2. It stopped half a meter from the vault door. For a moment, nothing. Then it raised the chainsaw until the blade tips touched the steel surface with a sound like wind chimes made of knives. The blade spun to life. The noise was catastrophic. Metal shrieking against metal. The high-pitched scream of teeth designed to cut through demonic armor, meeting 6 inches of reinforced steel. Sparks erupted in a cascade of orange light, so bright the camera feed automatically dimmed. The death dealers inside the vault felt the vibration through the floor, through the walls, through their bones. "That door," Victor said, his voice climbing toward panic, "is designed to withstand anti-tank weapons." The chainsaw punched through. Just a centimeter, the blade tip emerging on their side of the door like a metal fang. Then it withdrew, repositioned, and began cutting a vertical line. Slowly, deliberately. The mathematical precision of something that had all the time in the world and knew its prey couldn't escape. "Return fire," Thomas roared. "Concentrate fire on the door. Aim for center mass." 12 assault rifles opened up simultaneously. The UV rounds, each one capable of reducing a vampire to ash in seconds. hammered into the steel door from the inside, punching through in places, hoping to hit whatever stood on the other side. The muzzle flashes turned the vault into a strobe-lit nightmare, spent casings raining on stone floors. The chainsaw never stopped cutting. When the magazines ran empty, 96 rounds of armor-piercing UV ammunition expended in 4 seconds, the death dealers reloaded with the smooth efficiency of soldiers who'd done this thousands of times. The chainsaw had completed a 1-meter vertical cut. It repositioned and began a horizontal line. He's cutting a door, Maria realized, horror dawning. He's making an entrance. Thomas understood then. This wasn't a siege, wasn't even a battle. This was pest control. The armored figure wasn't trying to breach their defenses through force or speed. It was simply removing an obstacle with the same mechanical patience it would apply to any other barrier between it and its objective. The service tunnel, Thomas decided. Everyone move, now. The vault had a second exit, a narrow maintenance corridor designed for emergency evacuation, and too small for Lycan beasts to navigate easily. The death dealers abandoned their defensive positions and fled toward it. Behind them, the chainsaw continued its work, the shriek of tortured metal following them into the darkness. The service tunnel was cramped, forcing even the graceful vampires into single file. They moved fast, enhanced speed allowing them to cover the 100 meters to the surface exit in seconds. Thomas brought up the rear, assault rifle trained on the tunnel behind them, expecting at any moment to see that armored figure appear. The exit was a concealed door, disguised as part of the mountainside, camouflaged among the rocks and snow. Maria reached it first, punching the release code. The door slid open, revealing the forest beyond. Dark pines heavy with snow, the temperature still well below freezing. Scatter, Thomas ordered. Different directions. Rendezvous at the Prague safe house in 72 hours. Go. They went, blurring into the darkness with the supernatural speed that had kept their species alive through centuries of persecution. Within seconds, 11 death dealers had vanished into the Carpathian wilderness, leaving only Thomas at the threshold. He looked back down the tunnel, empty, silent. The chainsaw's scream had stopped. Either the figure had broken through, or it had stopped cutting. Either option was equally terrifying. Thomas stepped into the snow, letting the door slide shut behind him. He made it 15 meters into the tree line before his ancient instincts screamed a warning. He dove left. Something massive displaced the air where he'd been standing, close enough that he felt the passage of metal and ceramics moving at inhuman speed. Thomas rolled, came up in a combat crouch, rifle raised. The armored figure stood where Thomas had been a heartbeat ago. It had dropped from above, from a perch in the trees that Thomas's 300-year-old senses hadn't detected. In the moonlight filtering through the pines, the Praetor suit's markings seemed to pulse with their own inner light. The figure wasn't holding the chainsaw anymore. It had switched to a different weapon, a massive shotgun with double barrels and a brutal, industrial design. The barrels tracked Thomas with the smooth precision of a weapon's targeting system. For a frozen moment, vampire and armored warrior stared at each other across 5 meters of snow-covered ground. Thomas could hear his own heartbeat, slow but steady, for ancient vampire physiology maintaining calm even as his mind raced through options. Fight, flight, negotiation. The figure's helmet tilted, a slight movement that somehow conveyed consideration. Analysis. Its free hand moved to its belt and withdrew something. A small device covered in the same angular markings as its armor. The device projected a holographic display into the air between them. Incomprehensible symbols, energy readings, some kind of scanning data. Thomas saw his own silhouette in the hologram. Saw measurements, data streams, analysis scrolling in a language that wasn't human. The figure studied this for 3 seconds. Then the hologram shifted, displaying something else. Images of demons, hell knights and imps and worse things, their profiles marked with crimson targeting reticles. Then the hologram showed Thomas again, and then slowly, with deliberate intent, a reticle appeared over his silhouette. Not crimson. Amber. Uncertain classification. The figure lowered the device. The shotgun remained trained on Thomas, but the barrel hadn't moved a millimeter. It was waiting. Not for surrender, not for an explanation, waiting for Thomas to confirm what it suspected, that he was prey. Thomas made his choice. He'd survived 3 centuries by knowing when to fight and when to flee. This was not a fight he could win. He blurred backward, vampire speed launching him into the forest at velocities that turned the landscape into a dark smear. He covered 50 meters in 2 seconds, changing direction 3 times, using every trick he'd learned from centuries of combat. The shotgun blast caught him mid-leap. The impact was like being hit by a car, so Thomas felt something punch through his left shoulder, spinning him in midair. He crashed into a pine tree hard enough to snap its trunk, rolled through the snow, came up running. Blood, his blood, dark and viscous, painted a trail through the white powder. He'd been shot before, hundreds of times. Vampire regeneration meant most wounds were inconveniences. But this hurt actually hurt in a way that gunfire hadn't in decades. Thomas glanced at his shoulder and saw the damage. A fist-sized chunk of flesh simply gone, the wound cauterized by the shotgun's heat, refusing to heal at its normal rate. Behind him, the sound of boots on snow. Not running, walking. That same measured pace from the monastery. The patience of something that knew its prey was already dead. That this was just the interval between wound and corpse. Thomas ran. No elder vampire, 300 years old, survivor of the endless war, death dealer commander. Ran through the Carpathian forest like wounded game. Behind him, that inexorable pursuit continued. The armored figure tracking him through the darkness with technological precision that made mockery of his every evasion. He'd covered 200 meters when he heard the sound. A mechanical whine building to a high-pitched scream. Thomas dove behind a boulder, seconds before the plasma rifle opened fire. Blue-white energy bolts turned night into day, each impact on his cover vaporizing stone and creating small explosions of superheated rock. The barrage lasted 3 seconds. 12 shots, everyone precise, everyone exactly where Thomas had been. When it stopped, Thomas broke cover and ran again. The forest provided no shelter. The darkness provided no concealment. He might as well have been running across an open field for all the protection it gave him against something that hunted with technology beyond Earth's comprehension. A fallen log ahead. Thomas vaulted it in a single bound, landed in a crouch, spun with his assault rifle raised. The armored figure emerged from the tree line 30 meters away, weapons ready, visor glowing. Thomas opened fire, UV rounds hammering into that angular armor. He saw impact spark off the suit's surface, saw the figure's shields flare blue with each hit. The shields held. 20 rounds, 40, 60. The magazine ran dry. The figure hadn't even slowed down. Thomas dropped the useless rifle and ran again, accepting the truth his warrior's pride had delayed. This wasn't combat. This was execution, and the only question was how long the condemned could delay the inevitable. The satellite phone on Thomas's belt vibrated, the emergency channel. He pulled it while running, accepting the call with blood-slick fingers. "Sir," Victor's voice, transmitted from wherever he'd fled to. "We're monitoring your tracker. What's happening?" "It's hunting us." Thomas gasped, vampire lungs burning not from exertion, but from the psychological weight of being prey. "Tell the others, don't stop, don't hide, just run." The Slayer's grappling hook caught Thomas mid-sentence. The metal claw wrapped around his ankle with the snap of a bear trap, then contracted, yanking him off his feet. Thomas hit the ground hard, tried to tear the hook free. Then he was airborne. The winch on the Slayer's armor was designed to pull him toward distant platforms, to close gaps with charging demons. Applied to a vampire, it simply reeled Thomas in like a fish, dragging him across the snow at lethal velocity. Trees blurred past. Thomas clawed at the ground, his enhanced strength useless against the mechanical pull. He slammed to a stop at the Slayer's feet, looked up at that impassive visor, at the shotgun barrel descending toward his face. This close, Thomas could see details. The wear patterns on the armor, the scratches from weapons he couldn't identify, the modifications made to every surface. This wasn't ceremonial gear. This was equipment that had seen more combat than every death dealer in history combined. The shotgun pressed against Thomas's forehead. Cold metal, still warm from recent firing. One pull of the trigger would end 300 years of existence. The Slayer's other hand moved, in withdrawing that scanning device again. The hologram reactivated, displaying Thomas's biometric data, his energy signature, his cellular structure. The data scrolled past, analyzed in microseconds. Then, a new display. Comparative analysis. Demon physiology versus Thomas's physiology. 72% similarity. Not identical, not demonic, but close enough to trigger every instinct the Slayer possessed, every reflex honed across eons of fighting Hell's armies. Thomas saw the classification shift from amber to crimson on the hologram, saw the targeting reticle solidify, saw his death written in alien symbols. "Please," Thomas whispered, the first time he'd begged for anything in 2 centuries. "We're not demons. We're just trying to survive." The Slayer's visor stared down at him. Behind that crimson glow, Thomas imagined eyes that had seen things no being should witness, that had looked upon hell itself and responded with rage instead of fear. What was one vampire's plea against that kind of experience? The shotgun barrel pressed harder against Thomas's skull. Then, from somewhere in the forest, a sound. High-pitched, electronic, the specific alert tone of a death dealer emergency beacon. One of the others, Maria, probably, her sector was closest, had activated her distress call. A cry for help that every vampire in the region would detect. The Slayer's helmet turned toward the sound. Just a few degrees, attention dividing. Thomas felt the shotgun's pressure ease, microscopic but measurable. The figure's targeting systems were recalculating, threat assessment shifting to include this new variable. It was the opening Thomas needed. Not to fight, he was done fighting this thing, but to speak. "There are more of us," Thomas said quickly. "Thousands, across Europe, across the world. And we're at war with another species, the Lycans, werewolves. If you kill us, they win. If they win." He swallowed blood, forced words past broken ribs. "They'll spread, unchecked. The humans will discover us. The war will go public. Millions will die." The Slayer's attention returned to Thomas. The hologram flickered, processing this information. New data streams appeared. Population estimates, conflict projections, collateral damage calculations. The scanning device was analyzing Thomas's words for deception, cross-referencing biological stress indicators with semantic content. Thomas was telling the truth. The device confirmed it. But truth and importance were different things. In the Slayer's experience, demons lied constantly. They also occasionally told the truth when they thought it would save them. Neither changed his response. The shotgun barrel descended again. From the forest, multiple emergency beacons activated. The other death dealers, hearing Maria's call, responding with their own. 10 signals, scattered across 15 square kilometers, all crying for help, all identifying their positions, all making themselves targets. The Slayer straightened, boot lifting from Thomas's chest. The scanning device folded closed and disappeared into the armor. The shotgun maglocked to his back, replaced by the combat shotgun. Faster rate of fire, better for multiple targets. Thomas understood. The figure was going after the others. All of them. And it had assessed the tactical situation and decided that eliminating the scattered targets was more efficient than finishing the wounded one. Thomas wasn't escaping. He was simply being saved for last. The armored figure turned and began walking toward the nearest beacon signal. Toward Maria, toward Victor, toward 10 vampires who thought they'd reached safety. "Wait," Thomas called, forcing himself upright despite the agony in his shoulder. "What are you?" The Slayer stopped, didn't turn, just paused mid-step, considering the question with the same mechanical patience it applied to everything. Then it continued walking, disappearing into the darkness between the trees. Behind it, Thomas collapsed back into the snow, his phone still connected, Victor's frantic questions echoing from the speaker. "Sir? Sir, what's happening?" Thomas stared at the blood-painted snow, at the trail of his own desperate flight, at the forest that had failed to provide any sanctuary at all. "Tell the covens," he whispered into the phone. "All of them. Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Asia, Americas. Tell them Hell sent us a message tonight." "What message?" Thomas closed his eyes. Vampire healing already working on his wounds, knowing it wouldn't matter. The thing would circle back, would finish what it started. That was what hunters did. "That there's something worse than demons," he said quietly. "There's the thing that kills demons, and it just decided we're next." The Lycans safe house was buried 3 levels beneath an abandoned industrial complex in Bucharest, hidden behind enough steel and concrete to withstand a small-scale military assault. 52 werewolves called it home. Refugees from the war, survivors of coven purges, families trying to carve out existence in a world that had hunted them for centuries. They'd survived this long by staying hidden, by moving in the shadows, by knowing when the death dealers were close. Tonight, they had no warning at all. Quint was reviewing supply manifests when the first explosion shook the complex. Not the small arms fire that usually preceded vampire raids, this was something heavier, industrial. The lights flickered. Dust rained from the ceiling. The Lycans in the common area looked up, confused more than alarmed. And the death dealers hadn't found them in 3 years. Why would tonight be different? "Positions," Quint ordered, his alpha authority cutting through the confusion. "Armed personnel to the upper levels, non-combatants to the deep shelter. Move!" They moved with the disciplined chaos of people who drilled this scenario 100 times. Lycans grabbed weapons from hidden caches, silver-resistant firearms, reinforced blades, the tools of guerrilla warfare. The fighters formed up at choke points, while the civilians, including 6 children, 3 pregnant females, fled deeper into the bunker. The second explosion was closer. Then came a sound Quint had never heard before. Metal screaming, the sustained shriek of something cutting through the reinforced blast door that separated their sanctuary from the surface. Not plasma torches. Those took minutes, not breaching charges. Those were instantaneous. This was something else, something methodical and unstoppable. "What the hell are the vamps using?" muttered Kane, Quint's second in command, his hand already shifting to its hybrid clawed form. "I don't know," Quint admitted. But we're about to find out. The blast door, 6 inches of hardened steel designed to resist anything the Covens could throw at them, suddenly sprouted a glowing line. The metal along that line turned white-hot, then orange, then simply ceased to exist as the plasma cutter sliced through it like tissue paper. The line became a circle. The circle became a hole. The 3-ton door section fell inward with a crash that echoed through the complex. Through the smoke stepped something that made Quint's enhanced senses scream conflicting messages. Humanoid, armored, not vampire. The scent was wrong, the energy signature alien. It moved with mechanical precision, scanning the corridor with a visor that glowed like embers. In its hands, a weapon that looked like it belonged on a spacecraft, not a battlefield. "Fire!" Quint roared. 20 Lycans opened up simultaneously. The confined space turned into a storm of muzzle flashes and ricocheting rounds. The figure's shields flared blue-white under the barrage, energy barriers absorbing impacts that should have shredded flesh. It didn't retreat, didn't take cover, just stood there, weathering the storm like a monument to violence. When the first magazine ran dry, a 3-second eternity, the figure raised its weapon. The plasma rifle's discharge was blinding in the confined corridor. Each shot was a miniature sun, blue-white energy that turned matter into vapor. The first Lycan took a bolt to the chest and simply ceased to exist from the sternum up, the superheated plasma flash-cooking tissue and bone. The second Lycan dove aside, not fast enough. The plasma caught his shoulder, and the limb detached in a spray of cauterized flesh. The Slayer advanced, firing with mechanical precision. No wasted shots, no spray and pray. Each pull of the trigger ended a life. The plasma rifle doing to Lycan flesh what it had done to demons across infinite battlefields. Bodies hit the ground, trailing smoke. The smell of burned meat mixing with the ozone stench of discharged energy. "Shift! Everyone shift!" Kane bellowed, his own transformation already rippling through his body. The Lycans, who could still move, triggered their changes. Bones cracked and reformed. Muscle mass doubled, then tripled. Fur erupted from skin. Jaws extended into muzzles full of fangs. Within seconds, the corridor filled with hybrid-form werewolves. 2-meter-tall killing machines designed by viral evolution for close-quarter slaughter. They charged as a pack, the coordinated assault that had overwhelmed vampire death dealers for centuries. 12 transformed Lycans, moving with supernatural speed and strength. Claws that could shred steel, jaws that could bite through engine blocks. The Slayer holstered the plasma rifle and drew the super shotgun. The first Lycan covered 10 meters in less than a second, claws extended for a disemboweling strike. The shotgun roared. At point-blank range, the blast caught the werewolf center mass and turned its torso into red mist. The creature's momentum carried its legs forward another meter before they collapsed. Second Lycan, attacking from the left. The Slayer sidestepped with inhuman reflexes, letting the beast's claws scrape sparks off his armor. The shotgun's second barrel discharged into the Lycan's skull. The head exploded like a melon, brain matter painting the concrete walls. The Slayer broke the shotgun's breech, ejecting spent shells that hit the ground, still smoking. His hands moved in a blur. Reload, snap closed, raise, fire, all in the time it took the third Lycan to close distance. This one died mid-leap, the shotgun blast catching it in the throat and nearly decapitating it. 3 Lycans dead in as many seconds. The pack faltered, the predatory instincts warring with the tactical reality that they were being slaughtered. In their war with vampires, numbers usually won. Overwhelming force could overcome individual skill. But this armored figure wasn't an individual opponent. It was a meat grinder wearing armor, a mathematical equation where Lycan attacks went in and corpses came out. "Scatter," Quint ordered, recognizing a losing fight when he saw one. "Break off, break off." The surviving Lycans tried to retreat, but the corridor's confined space, chosen specifically to bottleneck vampire assaults, now became a killing field. The Slayer advanced, the super shotgun barking again and again. Each blast took a Lycan. Spine shattered, leg removed, rib cage demolished. Those who tried to flee died with exit wounds in their backs. Those who turned to fight died facing their executioner. Kane made it to a side corridor and shifted back to human form, hands fumbling for the detonator in his pocket. The last resort, the thermite charges hidden in the walls that would bring the entire complex down on their heads. Better to die in fire than be torn apart by this armored nightmare. His fingers found the detonator, started to press. A gauntleted fist punched through the concrete wall beside him, grabbed Kane by the throat, and hauled him through the wall like it was cardboard. Kane's back slammed into the opposite corridor's surface, hard enough to crack ribs. He looked up into that crimson visor, tried to shift again. The Slayer's other hand caught Kane's jaw mid-transformation. The fingers tightened. Kane felt his mandible creak, then crack, and then shatter under pressure that exceeded hydraulic presses. His scream came out as a wet gurgle. The Slayer lifted Kane one-handed, studying him with the same detached interest a scientist might show dissecting an insect. The scanning device appeared, holographic display activating. Kane's biometric data scrolled past. Viral infection vectors, cellular mutation, enhanced physiology. The analysis took 2 seconds. Conclusion: 89% similarity to demonic corruption, higher than the vampires, close enough to barely register as different. The Slayer's free hand moved to his belt, withdrawing a weapon Kane didn't recognize, brutal, industrial, with a serrated blade that began rotating with a high-pitched whine. The chainsaw bit into Kane's shoulder. The Lycan's enhanced regeneration meant nothing against teeth designed to cut through demon armor. Flesh parted, bones splintered. The blade chewed through Kane's torso in a diagonal line, emerging from his opposite hip in a spray of blood and viscera. The Slayer released what was left. Kane's body hit the ground in pieces, transformation reversing in death, hybrid features melting back to human as the Corvinus virus lost its host. Quint watched this from the deep shelter's monitoring station. Cameras throughout the complex showing the massacre in real time. 23 Lycans dead, 15 more wounded or fleeing. The armored figure moving through their home like death incarnate, methodically clearing each level with mechanical efficiency. "The children," whispered Maria. Different Maria, not the vampire. A Lycan mother whose son was 3 years old. "Please, Quint. The children." Quint looked at the monitor showing the deep shelter. 6 kids, ranging from age 2 to 12. 3 pregnant females, the non-combatants they'd sworn to protect, the future of their species, such as it was. On another monitor, the armored figure finished executing the wounded in Corridor C, reloaded its weapons, began moving toward the next level down, toward the shelter. "Everyone who can walk," Quint said quietly, "is leaving. Now, emergency tunnels. Don't stop until you hit the safe zones." He picked up the detonator Kane had dropped, the thermite charges still armed. "I'll buy you time." "Quint, you can't. Go." The Alpha Command cut through protest. The Lycans fled, carrying the children, supporting the wounded, almost streaming into the escape tunnels that would emerge 3 blocks away. Quint watched them disappear into the darkness, then turned his attention to the monitors. The figure had reached level 2. It was checking rooms, clearing spaces with the methodical precision of someone who'd done this so many times, it had become muscle memory. No rushing, no anger. Just the patient, inevitable advance of something that knew its prey couldn't escape. Quint shifted to hybrid form, his body expanding, bones cracking into new configurations. The transformation used to hurt. After 20 years, it was just uncomfortable. A small price for the strength to tear vampires apart, to protect his pack, to survive in a world that wanted them dead. For all the good it would do against this thing. He moved to the main corridor, thus positioning himself at the choke point between level 2 and the shelter. The thermite detonator went in his left hand. His right held a silver-resistant combat knife. Useless, probably, but Lycans died with weapons in their hands. It was tradition. The armored figure appeared at the far end of the corridor. 60 meters of concrete and steel between them. It stopped when it saw Quint, that visor glowing in the emergency lighting. For a moment, neither moved. "I don't know what you are," Quint called out, his hybrid vocal cords turning the words guttural. "Don't know what the vampires did to piss you off. But there are children down here. Innocents. Whatever war you're fighting, they're not part of it." The Slayer tilted his head slightly, processing, analyzing. The scanning device emerged, on hologram painting Quint's form in 3 dimensions. The data was more detailed this time. The figure was learning, cataloging the differences between vampire and Lycan physiology. The viral markers, the transformation mechanics, the pack's social structure. The hologram shifted, showing an image that made Quint's blood run cold. The shelter. The thermal signatures of every person hiding there, painted in shades of red and blue. 6 small signatures. The children. 3 signatures with secondary heat sources. The pregnant females. The scanner had already found them, already marked them, already decided their fate. "No," Quint whispered. Then louder, "No!" He charged, hybrid form launching him down the corridor at velocities that would have made him a blur to human eyes. The Slayer didn't move, didn't dodge. Just raised that brutal shotgun and fired. The first blast caught Quint in the shoulder, spinning him. The second took his left leg at the knee. He crashed to the ground, hybrid regeneration already working to seal the wounds, but too slow, too damaged. The detonator skittered from his grasp, sliding across the blood-slick floor. The Slayer walked forward, boots splashing through pooling blood. He stopped beside Quint's writhing form, looking down at the werewolf's attempts to regenerate. The scanning device reactivated, capturing video of the healing process. Fascinating, from a purely academic standpoint. The viral mechanisms were similar to demonic regeneration, but biologically based rather than hell-spawned. Still too close to demons to matter. Quint tried to speak, to beg, to offer something that might stay this armored hand. But his hybrid vocal cords were damaged, his words coming out as animal whines. He watched, helpless, as the figure stepped over him and continued toward the shelter. From the escape tunnels, the Lycans emerged 3 blocks away into a night that had become a waking nightmare. They heard the explosions, Quint's thermite charges detonating, bringing down portions of the complex in a desperate attempt to stop the unstoppable. They felt the ground shake, smelled the smoke. None of them looked back. They couldn't afford to. Not with the children crying, the wounded bleeding out, and something behind them that hunted with technological precision their species had never encountered. Maria clutched her son to her chest, feeling his small heartbeat against her own. What was that thing? She whispered to no one in particular. An elder Lycan named Gregor, who'd fought in the war since the 1800s, had no answer. "In 2 centuries of fighting vampires," he said quietly, "I've never seen anything like it. That wasn't a death dealer. That wasn't even human. Then what was it?" Gregor looked back at the smoke rising from their destroyed home, at the flames consuming everything they'd built. "A god of war," he said finally. "And it's declared jihad on our entire species." The Slayer emerged from the complex's ruins 4 minutes later. His armor was scorched, but intact, the Praetor's suit's energy shields having weathered the thermite blast with minimal damage. Behind him, the bunker collapsed in on itself, fires raging in the subsurface levels. The thermal signatures in the shelter had gone dark during the thermite detonation. Either dead from the blast or escaped through tunnels his scanning hadn't detected. Inefficient. He'd have to improve his detection protocols for future encounters. His HUD painted the city around him in tactical overlays. Bucharest. Population 1.9 million. According to data fragments intercepted from the Lycan communications network, this was just one safe house. There were others. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of these creatures spread across the European continent. And then there were the vampires, the ones from the monastery. 12 had escaped. His tracking systems had lost them in the wilderness, but they'd be in hiding now, regrouping, warning others. Both species were spreading, both were infected. Both exhibited demonic characteristics close enough to trigger his protocols. Both needed to be purged. The Slayer's gauntlet activated a holographic map. Data compiled from intercepted communications, satellite imagery, thermal anomaly patterns. The map painted targets across Eastern Europe. Suspected coven locations, known Lycan territories, sites of recent conflict between the two species. 47 priority targets. He selected the nearest one, a vampire stronghold in Prague. 70 death dealers according to intelligence intercepts. Distance, 885 kilometers. Travel time at current capabilities, 12 hours if he commandeered appropriate transportation. Acceptable timeline. The Slayer began walking toward the city center, toward the roads that would take him to Prague. Behind him, the industrial complex burned, black smoke rising into the winter sky like a funeral pyre. 52 Lykans had called it home. 38 were now dead. 14 had escaped. He'd find them eventually. After Prague, after the other covens, after every vampire and werewolf on this continent learned the same lesson Hell had learned eons ago. There is no negotiation, no mercy, no escape. There is only the hunt, and the Slayer never stops hunting. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the observation theater of Antigen Corporation's primary research facility, watching the live feeds from Bucharest with the clinical detachment that had made her one of the world's foremost experts in viral genetics. The screens displayed carnage, a gutted industrial complex, bodies that had once been Lycans, and thermal footage of something moving through the wreckage with methodical precision. Rewind to timestamp 2347, she instructed her assistant. I want to see the breach again. The footage reversed, then played forward. The reinforced blast door, rated to withstand direct hits from anti-tank weapons, simply ceased to exist along a perfectly circular cut line. The plasma discharge temperatures registered at over 15,000 degrees Celsius, and no human technology could generate that kind of heat in such a focused beam. That's not vampire tech, murmured Dr. Raymond Garvey, Antigen's military liaison. That's not Lycan. That's not anything in our databases. No, Sarah agreed, her eyes tracking the armored figure as it moved through the complex. It's not. She'd spent 12 years studying the Corvinus strain, the ancient virus that had created both vampires and Lycans, had overseen the capture and experimentation of dozens of immortals, had watched Subject 2, Selene's daughter Eve, demonstrate abilities that defied conventional biology. In all that time, Sarah had seen her species' place in the evolutionary hierarchy. Humans at the bottom, immortals in the middle, and perhaps something godlike at the top. This thing on the monitors? It wasn't godlike. Gods were capricious, the emotional limited by divine politics and cosmic rules. This was something worse. This was engineering, purpose, evolution distilled to a single function. "I want it," she said quietly. Garvey turned to her. "Doctor? That armor, those weapons, whatever's inside that suit." Sarah zoomed in on a freeze frame, showing the armored figure mid-execution, chainsaw buried in Lycan flesh. "Look at the design. Those aren't improvised weapons. They're purpose-built. The armor's energy shielding absorbed sustained fire from 20 Lykans without failing. That plasma rifle uses technology we won't develop for another 50 years. "You're talking about capture," Garvey said carefully. "Ma'am, that thing just killed 60 vampires and 38 Lykans in 12 hours. Our containment protocols were designed for immortals, not whatever this is." Sarah smiled. It was the expression that made her subordinates nervous, the look that preceded her most ambitious experiments. "Then we'll design new protocols. I want full deployment of Capture Team Alpha. Tranquilizer compounds specifically calibrated for unknown physiology. Electromagnetic pulse weapons in case it's cybernetic. Liquid nitrogen for thermal shock. And I want Subject 2 moved to the secure wing." "Eve? Why?" "Because if this thing is hunting immortals, our most valuable specimen just became bait." Sarah closed the feed, her mind already racing through scenarios. "Get me Dr. Lane's successor in bioweapons development. Tell him I need a full workup on potential countermeasures for plasma-resistant armor. And contact our assets in Prague. If this thing is moving west, I want eyes on it before it hits the next target. Doctor, with respect, we don't know what we're dealing with. For all we know, this could be some kind of advanced military project. If we interfere with, it's not military." Sarah pulled up another window. Analysis of the armor's design language, the angular symbols etched into its surface. "I had our linguistics AI run pattern recognition on those markings. No match to any human language, dead or living. No match to any known symbolic system. But there's structure there. Grammar, syntax, meaning." She highlighted a cluster of symbols on the figure's shoulder plate. This sequence appears 17 times across the visible armor surfaces. Repetition suggests importance. Religious iconography, perhaps, or a kill count. A kill count? Each mark might represent confirmed eliminations, battles won, demons slain. Sarah met Garvey's eyes. If this thing has been hunting demons, and it's now targeting our immortals, that suggests it can't tell the difference, or doesn't care to. That's quite a leap, Doctor. Is it? Sarah replayed the footage from the monastery. Watch how it fights. No hesitation, no fear. It walked through concentrated UV fire that would reduce an elder vampire to ash. When the vampires retreated, it pursued. When the Lycans charged, it stood its ground. That's not tactical adaptation. That's predatory certainty. It's fought things worse than vampires and werewolves. Probably much worse. She paused the feed on a close-up of the armored visor, that crimson glow capturing the camera's lens. Whatever this is, it didn't evolve naturally. Someone built it. Someone designed every weapon, every system, every protocol. And if we can capture it, study it, reverse engineer even a fraction of that technology, we'd have a weapon that could end the immortal war. Garvey finished. more than that. Sarah's smile widened. We'd have evolution in a bottle. The next stage of human development, armor and all. Immortals are viruses that learn to walk. This is genocide machinery. Imagine what Antigen could do with that kind of power. Garvey was quiet for a moment, weighing ambition against caution. Finally, I'll authorize Capture Team Alpha. But Doctor, if this goes wrong, it won't. Sarah was already pulling up deployment maps, calculating intercept points. Prague is 885 kilometers from Bucharest. If this thing is on foot, we have 12 hours minimum. If it commandeers transport, maybe 6. That gives us time to prepare, to set the trap. And if it doesn't go to Prague, then we'll follow it wherever it goes. Sarah closed her laptop with a decisive snap. Alert all Antigen facilities across Europe. I want real-time monitoring of every Vampire Coven and Lycan safehouse we've identified. The moment our target appears on any feed, I want to know about it. Yes, ma'am. After Garvey left, Sarah stood alone in the observation theater, staring at the frozen image of the armored figure. Somewhere behind that visor was something that had walked into hell itself and returned victorious. Something that viewed supernatural predators as prey. She'd spent her career trying to understand the Corvinus strain, to weaponize immortality for human benefit. But this was something beyond viral evolution. This was designed transcendence, and Sarah Chen was going to take it apart piece by piece until she understood how to recreate it. 300 kilometers away, in a secure facility beneath the streets of Vienna, Selene was having the same realization. The hybrid vampire stood in the operations center of what remained of the old Coven network, a coalition of survivors from a dozen different bloodlines, united by the destruction of the old order. On the screens around her, the same footage Sarah Chen was analyzing. The monastery massacre, the Bucharest complex burning, bodies strewn like broken dolls. David stood beside her, his aristocratic features tight with controlled fear. That's not Antigen, not the Lycans. What is it? I don't know. Seline rewound the footage to the moment the armored figure first emerged from the dimensional rift. But it came through with demons. Real demons, not what we call Lycans or vampires. Creatures from somewhere else. Hell? Maybe. Selene zoomed in on an imp's corpse, the demonic anatomy visible in the thermal imaging before it dissolved to ash. These things aren't viral infections. They're not biological in any sense we understand. They're supernatural. Genuinely supernatural. Thomas's voice crackled over the secure channel, transmitted from whatever safe house he'd fled to after the monastery attack. Selene, you need to see this. A new window opened. Satellite footage from the past 4 hours, tracking the armored figure's movement from the monastery to Bucharest. But it wasn't the route that caught Selene's attention. It was the stops along the way. 3 Lycan scout positions, 2 vampire safe houses, all eliminated with mechanical efficiency, the buildings burning, bodies counted by thermal imaging. 19 Lycans, 7 vampires, all dead within the 6 hours between the monastery and Bucharest attacks. It's not just retaliating, David said, horror dawning. It's hunting systematically. Selene's enhanced vision picked out details the others missed. The way the figure moved, the absolute economy of motion, the fact that it hadn't sustained any visible damage despite fighting through multiple engagements. This wasn't a soldier. Soldiers got tired, made mistakes, took wounds. This was something else. Where's Eve? Selene asked suddenly. David's expression tightened. Still at the safe house in Bratislava. Why? because whatever this thing is, it's hunting immortals. And Eve. Selene didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Eve was a hybrid of hybrids, vampire and Lycan genetics merged in ways that made her unique in the world. If this armored figure was targeting supernatural entities, Eve would register as the biggest target on the continent. I'll dispatch a security team. No. Selene was already moving toward the weapons locker. I'm going myself. You coordinate with the other covens. Find out if anyone knows what this thing is. Check the ancient records, the old texts. Something this effective at killing our kind. There might be historical precedent. Selene, if it already killed Marcus and Victor. Marcus and Victor were caught off guard. I won't be. She pulled her signature pistols from the rack, checked the UV ammunition loads. And I'm not planning to fight it. I'm planning to understand it. And if understanding isn't an option? Selene met David's eyes. Then I'll do what I've always done. Protect my daughter, no matter the cost. She left the operations center at a run, moving through the underground passages with the supernatural speed that had made her the most feared death dealer in vampire history. Behind her, David pulled up communication channels to every coven in Europe, broadcasting a warning that was already hours too late. Unknown hostile, targeting both vampires and Lycans. Extreme danger, avoid engagement. In Bratislava, Eve sat in a fortified apartment 3 stories underground, drawing pictures with crayons that had been smuggled in by sympathetic humans. She was 12 years old, physically at least. Mentally, the accelerated development of her hybrid genetics made her far more mature. She understood that people wanted to hurt her, understood that her existence was a weapon in someone else's war. But she was still a child, and children drew pictures. The current drawing showed a figure in armor, surrounded by flames. Eve didn't know why she was drawing it. She'd never seen anything like it before. But the image had been in her dreams lately. A recurring nightmare of something walking through fire, weapons blazing, leaving nothing alive in its wake. In her dream, the figure always turned to look at her, always raised its weapon. Always, the building shook, a small tremor barely perceptible to humans. But Eve's enhanced senses felt it in her bones. Something heavy had impacted the structure's exterior. Something was breaching the building. She dropped the crayons and ran to the security panel, fingers flying over the touchscreen to access the external cameras. The feeds showed the street level, empty. The building entrance, secure. The movement on the roof camera, a figure in angular armor, visor glowing crimson, planting something against the reinforced concrete. The device beeped twice, then detonated. The explosion tore through 3 meters of reinforced material like it was wet cardboard. Eve's enhanced hearing picked up the sounds of boots on concrete, descending through the levels. The building's security team, 6 armed guards, all human but well-trained, opened fire. She heard the gunshots, heard the screams that followed, heard the sounds of bodies hitting the floor. 15 seconds. 6 guards dead in 15 seconds. Eve backed away from the door, her hybrid instincts screaming at her to run, to hide, to transform and fight. But she was 12. She'd never been in real combat. Her abilities were theoretical, untested outside of Antigen's laboratories. The apartment door exploded inward, not kicked. Something had punched through it with enough force to tear the reinforced steel from its hinges. Through the smoke stepped the figure from her nightmares, weapons ready, visor scanning the space. That crimson glow found her. Eve pressed against the far wall, her small hands clenched into fists. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't do anything. The Slayer's scanning device emerged, hologram painting Eve's form in 3 dimensions. The data that scrolled past was unlike anything his systems had encountered. Dual viral infections, hybrid genetics, cellular regeneration that exceeded even the elder vampires. Power readings off the scale for something so small. The hologram showed her internal structure. 2 hearts beating in complex rhythm, enhanced musculature, a nervous system that operated at velocities approaching his own enhanced biology. This wasn't just another vampire or Lycan. This was something new. The targeting reticle appeared over Eve's hologram. Amber classification, unknown threat category. The analysis algorithms ran probability calculations, potential danger at maturity, combat capabilities, threat multiplication if allowed to reproduce. Conclusion: eliminate target. The super shotgun came up, barrel centering on Eve's small chest. The Slayer's finger moved to the trigger, applying the first pound of pressure. 2 more pounds, and the shotgun would fire. I would end this anomaly, would prevent whatever threat it might pose. Eve didn't run, didn't beg. She just stood there, tears streaming down her face, looking at him with eyes that held too much understanding for someone so young. "You're like me," she whispered. "You're alone too." The Slayer paused. The statement didn't make sense. He was nothing like this creature. He was human, or had been once. Enhanced, augmented, possibly immortal, but fundamentally human. This thing was viral corruption made flesh. But the scanning device showed something his weapons couldn't. Emotional state analysis. Fear, yes. Terror, certainly. But also recognition, empathy. The child saw him not as a monster, but as something familiar. Something that understood isolation. Something that knew what it meant to be different from everything else in existence. His finger eased off the trigger. 1 pound of pressure instead of 3. The shotgun remained aimed, but not firing. His combat protocols demanded elimination. His threat assessment algorithms screamed to pull the trigger. But something else. Something buried deep beneath eons of rage and bloodshed, some fragment of the man he'd been before hell, hesitated. The apartment's security system crackled to life, Selene's voice transmitting from speakers. "Intruder detected in Safe House 7. Security team report. Eve, if you can hear this, get to the panic room now." Eve didn't move, kept staring at the armored figure, at the weapon that could end her existence with a single pull. "They're coming for you," she said quietly. "My mother. She's very strong. She'll try to kill you to protect me." The Slayer's tactical analysis agreed. And the vampire designated Selene was en route. ETA 7 minutes. Hybrid physiology, combat experience exceeding most of her species, maternal protection instinct that would override survival logic. She would attack regardless of odds. Standard protocol. Eliminate the child, prepare ambush for pursuing adult. But his finger still wasn't pulling the trigger. "I know what you are," Eve continued, her voice steadier now. "You're a weapon. Someone made you to kill things. Bad things. Demons." She wiped tears from her face. "But we're not demons. We're just different, trying to survive." The scanning device ran analysis on her statements. Truth probability? 94%. The child believed what she was saying. And the data supported it. Genetically, these creatures weren't demonic in origin. They were viral mutations of baseline human DNA. Earthborn, natural in their own way, not demons. The realization crashed through his protocols like a thunderbolt. He'd been operating on false classification. The vampires, the Lykans, they resembled demons, behaved like demons, triggered all his combat instincts. But they weren't demons. He'd slaughtered dozens of potentially innocent beings based on surface similarity. The super shotgun lowered, not by much, just a few degrees. Barrel no longer aimed at Eve's heart. The Slayer stood motionless, combat protocols warring with new data, trying to reconcile eons of demon-hunting programming with the reality that these targets might not be demons at all. Eve saw the weapon lower and felt a surge of hope. "You can understand me. I know you can." She took a cautious step forward. "The demons you fought, the real demons, they came here, through that portal, and you were chasing them, weren't you?" The Slayer's helmet dipped slightly. Acknowledgement. "Are there more?" Eve asked. "More demons trying to come through?" The scanning device projected a hologram between them. Data from the collapsed rift, energy signatures, dimensional analysis. The portal had been forced closed, but the readings suggested instability. Multiple weak points across the region. Hell was testing this reality's boundaries, looking for entry points. There would be more rifts, more demons, more invasions, and he'd been wasting time killing the wrong targets. Before either could move, the building shook again. Not from above this time, from the entrance. Selene had arrived, and she'd brought backup. The security feeds showed 5 vampires in full Death Dealer gear, weapons ready, some moving through the building with lethal precision. The Slayer's tactical overlay painted them in amber classifications. No longer crimson, not demons, just obstacles between him and his actual mission. Eve saw his posture shift, saw the weapon systems activate. "Please don't hurt them. They're just protecting me." The Slayer looked at the child, then at the approaching vampires, then at the holographic data showing potential demon incursion points across Europe. His mission parameters were clear: eliminate demonic threats. But he'd been operating on false intelligence, treating potential allies as enemies. Inefficient, counterproductive. He needed to recalibrate. The apartment's far wall exploded inward as Seline came through it like a battering ram. Pistols raised, UV rounds already firing. When the Slayer's shields flared under the barrage, energy barriers absorbing impacts. He could return fire, could end Seline in seconds, could eliminate all 5 Death Dealers and continue his hunt. But that would confirm Eve's fear, would cement his role as indiscriminate killer rather than demon hunter. Instead, the Slayer holstered the super shotgun and raised both hands, the universal gesture for ceasefire, preserved across countless dimensions and species. Seline didn't stop firing. She put 12 rounds into his shields before her enhanced vision registered his posture. The hands raised, the weapons mag-locked, the complete lack of aggressive movement. "Hold fire," she commanded. The Death Dealers behind her froze, fingers on triggers, waiting. Mother and armored warrior faced each other across 5 meters of destroyed apartment. Between them, Eve stood unharmed, breathing hard, tears still wet on her face, but alive. "You didn't kill her," Selene said slowly, the realization dawning. "You had time. You had opportunity. Why didn't you kill her?" The Slayer's visor turned toward Selene. The scanning device activated, painting her form in holographic light. The analysis scrolled past. Hybrid vampire, enhanced abilities, maternal protection active, threat probability 0% unless provoked. Not a demon, not an enemy, potentially an ally. He pulled a new device from his armor, a data storage unit covered in the same angular markings. He set it on the floor between them and stepped back, hands still raised. The device activated, projecting a hologram into the air. Footage from the monastery attack, demons pouring through the rift, Hell's invasion attempt, and then more data. Dimensional weak points across Europe, probability curves for future incursions, threat assessment showing Hell's strategic interest in this reality. The message was clear even without words. The real enemy isn't here yet, but they're coming. Selene stared at the data, her centuries of combat experience recognizing tactical intelligence when she saw it. You're hunting demons, real demons, and you think there are more. The Slayer's helmet dipped. Affirmative. But you've been killing vampires and Lycans. You slaughtered an entire coven, destroyed a Lycan safe house. You... Selene's voice caught as understanding dawned. You thought we were demons. You couldn't tell the difference. Another nod. Confirmation. Can you tell the difference now? The Slayer gestured to his scanning device, then to Eve, then to Selene, whilst the holographic displays showed their genetic structures, the viral nature of their conditions, the earth-born origin of their species. Not demonic, not hell-spawned, just infected humans trying to survive. He'd been wrong, and in his wrongness, he'd killed dozens who might have been allies against the real threat. Selene lowered her weapons slowly. There's a human organization called Antigen. They've been experimenting on our kind, trying to weaponize us. They have facilities across Europe, research stations, detention centers where they keep vampires and Lycans imprisoned. She pulled up her own data on a tablet, showing Antigen's locations. If you're looking for real monsters, human monsters who torture and kill for profit, they're a good place to start. And if demons are planning another invasion, Antigen's genetic research might attract them. The Slayer studied the data. 12 major facilities, unknown number of human scientists and security personnel, potentially hundreds of immortal prisoners. His combat protocols demanded clarity. Who was the enemy? Demons, definite targets. Antigen, probable targets, human cruelty quantifiable as threat. Vampires/Lycans, reclassified as non-hostile unless provoked. The parameters were changing. His mission was evolving. And somewhere in an Antigen facility, Dr. Sarah Chen was preparing a trap, unaware that her target had just gained the one thing demons had never given the Slayer: reason to show restraint. The Antigen Corporation's main research facility occupied 18 acres of industrial property on the outskirts of Prague, disguised as a pharmaceutical manufacturing plant. 300 employees worked above ground, producing legitimate medical supplies and maintaining the corporate fiction. Below ground, in laboratories extending 5 levels deep, the real work happened. Genetic experimentation on captured immortals, bioweapons development, and the systematic exploitation of the Corvinus strain. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the primary observation deck, watching her trap come together. Capture Team Alpha is in position, Garvey reported, indicating tactical positions on the holographic display. 60 operators, full NBC suits, armed with tranquilizer systems calibrated for unknown physiology. We've got EM pulse generators at every entrance, liquid nitrogen deployment systems in the main corridors, and reinforced containment cells ready for immediate transfer. What about the bait? Sarah asked. Garvey pulled up another feed. Subject 47. A vampire elder captured 3 months ago during a raid on a Munich coven. The creature had been useful for tissue samples and regeneration studies, but its value had plateaued. Now it would serve a final purpose. We've placed him in the surface level holding area, Garvey explained. Minimal security, deliberately exposed in the thermal scans. If our target is hunting immortals, this should draw it in. Sarah nodded, studying the elder vampire on the monitor. The creature looked haggard, malnourished. Antigen kept immortal specimens in controlled starvation to prevent full-strength resistance. Subject 47 wouldn't survive a confrontation with the armored figure. That was the point. How long until projected arrival? Based on the movement pattern from Bucharest, 6 to 8 hours. We've seeded intelligence through compromised vampire channels suggesting a major coven presence here. If it's systematic in its hunting, Prague should be the next logical target. And if it doesn't take the bait? Garvey smiled thinly. Then we activate Plan B. Subject 2 is being transported from Bratislava as we speak. The hybrid child's energy signature is unique enough that our target won't be able to ignore it. Sarah turned sharply. I authorized surveillance on Eve, not capture. Doctor, with respect, we've been trying to recapture Subject 2 for months. This is the perfect opportunity. Use her as bait, capture the armored entity, and recover our most valuable specimen. 3 objectives, 1 operation. Selene will never allow. Selene is in Bratislava dealing with the aftermath of our target's last attack. By the time she realizes what's happening, we'll have Eve secured in the deep containment level. The hybrid can't escape from there. Sarah considered this. The logic was sound, even if the ethics were questionable. But ethics had never been Antigen's priority. Progress was, understanding was, power was. Fine, she decided. But I want Subject 2 kept in pristine condition, no harm beyond what's necessary for containment. She's worth more as a genetic template than as bait. Understood. Transport ETA is 90 minutes. Sarah returned her attention to the monitors, watching her pieces move into position. Somewhere out there, an armored killer was moving toward Prague, hunting immortals with mechanical efficiency. It didn't know it was walking into a trap. Didn't know that human ingenuity and corporate resources had been preparing for its arrival. Soon, she'd have it in a laboratory. Soon, she'd understand what made it tick. And then, humanity would have its own demon killer. 80 kilometers outside Prague, the Slayer stood in an abandoned warehouse, studying the holographic data Selene had provided. The vampire had been surprisingly cooperative once she understood he wasn't targeting Eve. She'd given him intelligence on Antigen's operations, facility locations, security protocols. In exchange, he'd shared his dimensional analysis of Hell's ongoing invasion attempts. An alliance of convenience. Temporary, but functional. His armor's analytical systems processed the Antigen data, highlighting the Prague facility as the primary target. Largest research center, highest concentration of immortal prisoners, most advanced bioweapons development. If Hell was interested in this reality, Antigen's genetic research would be a strategic asset worth corrupting. Priority target confirmed. The facility's security was sophisticated by this world's standards. Armed guards, surveillance networks, reinforced structures. His HUD painted probable threat levels. Minimal. He'd breached UAC Mars facilities with 10 times the firepower. Prague would be straightforward. His weapons check was automatic. The muscle memory from eons of combat. Super shotgun loaded, plasma rifle charged, BFG 9000 at 89% capacity, chainsaw fuel at adequate levels, crucible blade ready. The Praetor suit's energy shields were at full strength, the Argent energy reserve stable despite the lack of demon kills to replenish them. He was ready. But something made him pause. A tactical consideration that hadn't mattered in Hell but seemed relevant here. Antigen was human. Scientists, security personnel, probably some who were just following orders, unaware of the full scope of the corporation's activities. In Hell, everything was a demon. Everything was guilty. Everything died. Here, the lines were blurred. His targeting protocols demanded clarity. He pulled up Selene's intelligence files again, studying the details. Forced experimentation on conscious subjects, genetic torture, prisoners kept in permanent starvation, children, like Eve, used as test subjects for weaponized viruses. The humans running Antigen weren't innocent. They'd chosen cruelty, chosen exploitation, chosen to treat sentient beings as resources. Close enough to demons for his purposes. Target classification, hostile. Elimination authorized. The Slayer began moving toward Prague, his enhanced physiology allowing him to maintain a steady 40 kilometers per hour across rough terrain. He'd be at the facility in 2 hours, well before Selene's intelligence suggested Antigen expected him. Surprise was just another weapon. In Bratislava, Selene discovered the empty safe house 90 seconds after the Antigen extraction team had departed. The door had been breached with plasma cutters. Professional work, military precision, and the security team lay dead in the corridors, killed with suppressed weapons and coordinated fire. No survivors, no witnesses. And Eve was gone. David's voice crackled over her comm. "Selene, what's your status?" "They took her." Selene's voice was flat, emotionless. The tone she used when rage went beyond expression into something cold and absolute. "Antigen. They took Eve." "How long ago?" 10 minutes. Maybe 15. She was already moving, enhanced speed launching her toward the parking structure where she'd left her vehicle. "Track them. Satellite, traffic cameras, anything. Find out where they're taking her." "On it." "But Selene, if they're moving her to a secure facility, I don't care how secure it is." She reached her car, a modified high-performance sedan equipped with UV-resistant glass and reinforced armor. The engine roared to life. "I'm getting my daughter back, even if I have to tear down every Antigen facility in Europe." The satellite data came through as she accelerated onto the highway. A convoy of 3 vehicles, moving west toward Prague. Antigen's main research center, the most heavily defended facility in their network. Also the place the armored figure was most likely targeting. Selene's tactical mind processed this immediately. The creature, whatever it was, had shown restraint with Eve, had lowered its weapon when confronted with a child. If it was planning to attack Antigen Prague, and Antigen was using Eve as bait. 2 scenarios. Either the creature would ignore Eve and focus on the demons and human scientists, or it would see her as a priority target and eliminate her before addressing other threats. Selene couldn't risk either outcome. She pushed the accelerator to the floor, the sedan's modified engine launching it to speeds that would have been suicidal for human drivers. Her enhanced reflexes made the blurred landscape navigable. Her centuries of combat experience calculating intercept vectors and tactical approaches. ETA to Prague, 73 minutes. If she was lucky, she'd arrive before Antigen finished setting their trap. If she was very lucky, she'd get Eve out before the armored figure arrived. If she was unlucky. Selene didn't believe in luck. She believed in skill, determination, and the willingness to do whatever was necessary to protect her daughter. If that meant facing down Antigen security forces and an armored demon killer simultaneously, so be it. No one took her child and lived. On a subject 47 had been a vampire for 217 years. In that time, he'd seen the rise and fall of empires, fought in 2 world wars, survived the Lycan purges and the Elder conflicts. He'd been captured by Antigen 3 months ago. A moment of carelessness, a trap he should have seen coming. And every day since had been an exercise in controlled torture. Now he sat in a holding cell with deliberately weakened security, watching guards move with obvious nervousness, smelling the fierce sweat of humans who knew something dangerous was coming. They were using him as bait. Subject 47 might have found it insulting if he weren't so weak. Months of starvation had reduced his strength to barely above human levels. His regeneration was sluggish. His enhanced senses were dulled. He was prey now, not predator. The irony wasn't lost on him. He's movement at the perimeter, one guard reported into his radio. Thermal signature, single entity, approaching from the east. Subject 47's enhanced hearing picked up the response. Let it come. All teams hold position. Remember, we want it contained, not killed. Dr. Chen wants it intact. They really thought they could capture whatever was coming. Subject 47 had heard the reports from other immortals. Whispered intelligence passed between cells. An armored figure that slaughtered vampires and Lycans with equal efficiency. That walked through concentrated fire without slowing. That killed with the mechanical precision of a natural disaster. And Antigen thought tranquilizer darts and EM pulses would stop it. Humans, always overestimating their capabilities. The facility alarms didn't sound, and that was the first sign something was wrong with Antigen's plan. The armored figure didn't breach the main entrance, didn't trigger the carefully positioned sensors, didn't walk into the obvious trap. Instead, it went through the wall. The explosion was precise. A shaped charge that blew through 3 meters of reinforced concrete like it was drywall. Subject 47's cells shook, dust raining from the ceiling. Through the breach stepped the figure from the intelligence reports. Angular armor, glowing visor, weapons that looked designed by alien minds. Target acquired, someone shouted. All teams converge on Sector 7, deploy countermeasures. The Slayer's tactical analysis had identified the bait immediately. One vampire, deliberately exposed, security presence too light for a facility this size. Obvious trap. Standard protocol would be to avoid it, find alternative entry points. But the Slayer wasn't interested in avoiding traps. He was interested in ending threats. The facility's EM pulse generators activated, flooding the corridor with electromagnetic energy designed to disable electronic systems. The Slayer's HUD flickered for a microsecond, then compensated, his armor's shielding adapting to the attack. Antigen technology was sophisticated for this world. It was primitive compared to UAC's demonic energy harvesting systems he'd destroyed on Mars. The first Capture Team Alpha squad rounded the corner. 12 operators in full NBC gear, tranquilizer weapons raised. They fired in coordinated volley, 40 darts striking the Slayer's armor simultaneously. Each dart was loaded with enough sedative to drop an elephant, when he calibrated for unknown physiology. The darts bounced off his energy shields like rain. The squad leader's eyes widened behind his mask. Secondary protocol, switch to... The plasma rifle spoke. 12 shots, 12 operators dead in 3 seconds. The superheated energy punched through their protective gear like it was tissue paper, flash cooking flesh and bone. Bodies hit the floor in smoking heaps. The Slayer advanced, his boots splashing through pools of blood that were still boiling from the plasma's heat. The facility's internal sensors tracked his movement. AI-driven security systems deploying countermeasures in real time. Blast doors sealing corridors, liquid nitrogen flooding sections, automated turrets emerging from wall panels. He walked through it all. The blast doors were reinforced steel, and the chainsaw cut through them in seconds. The liquid nitrogen was designed to induce hypothermic shock. His suit's environmental controls maintained comfortable internal temperature. The automated turrets fired armor-piercing rounds. His shields held. In the observation deck, Sarah Chen watched her trap collapse with the detached horror of a scientist seeing her hypothesis proven catastrophically wrong. "It's not stopping," Garvey said unnecessarily, his voice tight. "None of the countermeasures are working." "I can see that." Sarah's mind was racing, recalculating, adapting. Where's Subject 2? Deep containment, level 5. We've got her in the reinforced cell with the UV barriers. Pull her out. Get her to the surface. If we can't capture the target with our systems, maybe we can use the child as leverage. Doctor, Selene just breached the facility perimeter. She's moving toward the deep levels. Of course she was. Sarah pulled up the security feeds, watching the hybrid vampire tear through the parking structure security with contemptuous ease. Two problems converging on one location: an unstoppable armored killer and an enraged mother. And between them, Antigen's most valuable research subject. Seal level 5, Sarah ordered. Complete lockdown. Nothing gets in or out until we can establish control of the situation. Ma'am, our teams are being slaughtered. Then pull them back. Establish defensive positions in the deep levels. We bought this facility for its security. Let's see if it can actually contain something. On the monitors, the armored figure had reached Subject 47's cell. The vampire elder watched through the reinforced glass as the Slayer approached, weapons ready. Subject 47 had survived 2 centuries of warfare, had faced down Lycan alphas and rival covens, had stared death in the face more times than he could count. This was different. This wasn't death as an opponent. This was death as a concept, rendered in armor and armed with weapons beyond comprehension. The Slayer studied Subject 47 through the glass. The scanning device emerged, hologram analyzing the vampire's condition. Malnourished, weakened, injured. Not a combat threat. But the cell design, the deliberate exposure, the light security, all confirmed this was bait. Which meant the real threat was deeper in the facility. The Slayer turned away from Subject 47's cell and began moving toward the stairwell that led to the lower levels. Behind the glass, the vampire elder felt an unexpected emotion: relief. Then the cell door exploded open. The Slayer hadn't forgotten about Subject 47, hadn't dismissed him as irrelevant. He'd simply reprioritized. First, eliminate the human threat. Then, address the imprisoned immortals. Subject 47 stared at the open door, at freedom that had appeared without explanation, without negotiation. The armored figure was already descending the stairs, boots echoing in the corridor. The vampire elder stood on shaking legs and stumbled toward the exit. Around him, other cells were opening. The Slayer had triggered a mass release protocol, freeing every immortal prisoner on this level. Dozens of vampires and Lycans, weakened but mobile, streaming into the corridors. In the observation deck, Sarah watched her research subjects escape with mounting horror. He's not just attacking, he's liberating, he's compromising our entire operation. Garvey finished. Doctor, we need to evacuate. This facility is lost. No. Sarah's voice was steel. We still have Subject 2. We still have leverage. As long as we control the hybrid child, we control the situation. Deep in level 5, Eve sat in a cell designed to hold elder vampires, her small hands pressed against UV-reinforced glass. She could feel the vibrations through the floor. Explosions, distant combat, the systematic destruction of the facility above her. He was coming. The armored figure who'd spared her life, who'd lowered his weapon when she'd asked him to. Was he coming to save her? Or to finish what he'd started? Eve didn't know, but she understood one thing with perfect clarity. When the Doomslayer, Selene, and Antigen security forces converged on this level, the resulting battle would determine not just her fate, but the fate of everyone caught between humanity's ambition and Hell's invasion. And in the chaos, somewhere in the facility's depths, the dimensional barriers were weakening. Hell's scouts were watching, waiting for the perfect moment to tear open another rift. The real war hadn't started yet, but it was about to. Level 4 was a slaughterhouse. The Slayer had descended through the facility like a force of nature, and Antigen security forces had learned, too late, that there was a profound difference between defending against immortals and defending against something that had fought its way through hell itself. The corridors were painted with the remains of 3 capture teams, their advanced equipment useless against weapons that operated on principles their science couldn't comprehend. Commander Garvey had retreated to level 3 with the surviving operators, 23 men and women who'd signed up to contain vampires and werewolves, not to face walking apocalypse. He established a defensive position at the main stairwell, the only route between levels 3 and 4, and prepared for what he knew was a losing battle. "All units, sound off," he commanded into the tactical channel. The responses came back ragged. Team 7, 4 effectives. Team 9, 2 effectives. Team 12, I'm the only one left. 23 soldiers, against something that had killed 60 in the past 15 minutes. "EM pulse generators are online," reported the technical specialist, her hands shaking as she worked the controls. "Concentrated discharge, maximum intensity. If his shields adapt like before, we've got maybe 5 seconds before they compensate." 5 seconds is all we need. Garvey checked his weapon, a prototype plasma rifle reverse-engineered from captured alien technology. Antigen had been developing it for use against elder vampires. Now it would face its first field test against something far worse. The moment he enters the kill zone, we hit him with everything. EM pulse, plasma fire, then fall back to the containment doors and seal them. Even if we can't stop him, we can slow him down long enough for Dr. Chen to evacuate with Subject 2. "Commander," one of the younger operators said, his voice cracking, "what if slowing him down isn't enough? What if—" The lights went out. Not a power failure. The emergency systems kicked in immediately, bathing the corridor in red emergency lighting. But the main power grid had been severed, deliberately cut. "He's in the electrical system," the technical specialist whispered. "He's cutting our power at the source." Garvey's tactical display showed the facility's power grid dying section by section, a systematic shutdown that spoke to intelligence and planning. The armored figure wasn't just a brute force weapon, and it was analyzing their defenses, identifying weaknesses, exploiting them with surgical precision. "Switch to backup batteries," Garvey ordered. "All teams, thermal imaging only. He wants darkness, will..." The EM pulse generators exploded, not from external attack, from internal sabotage. The Slayer had accessed the facility's network through hardline connection, identified the pulse generator's control systems, and overloaded them remotely. The detonations tore through the defensive position, killing 4 operators instantly and sending the rest scrambling for cover. Through the smoke and sparks walked the Slayer, descending the stairs with that same measured pace, weapons ready. His visor glowed brighter in the darkness, a crimson beacon that drew fire like a moth to flame. 19 weapons opened up simultaneously. The plasma rifle in Garvey's hands screamed as it discharged, blue-white energy joining the storm of conventional rounds and explosive ordnance. The Slayer's shields flared so bright, the corridor lit up like daylight, energy barriers absorbing impacts that would have leveled a building. The shields held for 3 seconds. 4, 5. Then the Slayer raised the BFG 9000. "Scatter!" Garvey screamed, recognizing the weapon from the satellite footage of the monastery. "Everyone, move!" The green sphere erupted from the barrel, drifting almost lazily through the corridor. When it detonated, reality itself seemed to scream. The argent energy consumed everything within 30 meters, operators, equipment, sections of the walls and ceiling. The blast wave threw Garvey backward, his armor cracking from the impact, his plasma rifle melting in his hands. When his vision cleared, the corridor was gone. Just a crater, edges still glowing with residual energy. Of his team, 3 remained, himself and 2 operators who'd been far enough back to survive the peripheral blast. The Slayer stepped over the rubble, reloading the BFG with mechanical efficiency. His armor showed scorch marks from the plasma fire, but no actual damage. The shields had already regenerated to full strength. Garvey pushed himself upright, his body screaming protest from broken ribs and internal bleeding. He pulled his sidearm, a pathetic 9mm that would be useless against those shields, and aimed at the approaching figure. "You're not taking her," he said, blood bubbling from his lips. "Whatever you want with the hybrid, you're not—" The Slayer walked past him. Didn't shoot. He didn't engage. Simply moved past as if Garvey was furniture, irrelevant to the mission. The insult was almost worse than death would have been. Garvey tried to raise the pistol to fire at the armored back, but his broken ribs made the movement agony. He collapsed against the wall, watching the Slayer descend toward level 5, toward Eve. "Dr. Chen," he gasped into his comm, "target is proceeding to your location. We couldn't. Sarah's voice came back tight with controlled fear. "Understood, Commander. You did what you could. All personnel, evacuate to surface level. This facility is lost." Selene had entered the facility through the parking structure, moving with the lethal grace that had made her legendary among death dealers. The security forces barely slowed her down. She'd been fighting Lycans for centuries. Moker and humans with guns were manageable by comparison. 6 guards dead in the first 30 seconds. Another 8 eliminated as she descended through the maintenance shafts toward the deep levels. But she wasn't fast enough. The facility's security feeds showed the armored figure already on level 4, already past most of the defenses. He'd be at Eve's location in minutes. Selene pushed harder, vampire physiology allowing her to drop 3 stories through a ventilation shaft and land in a crouch on level 5's main corridor. The emergency lighting painted everything in shades of blood red. Ahead, she could see the containment wing where they'd be keeping Eve. Behind her, she heard boots on metal. The Slayer, descending through the same shaft she'd used, following her trail. Selene ran. Not from him. She'd face down anything for her daughter. But she needed to reach Eve first, needed to get her clear before the armored figure arrived and forced a confrontation Selene wasn't certain she could win. The containment wing's entrance was sealed, a massive vault door designed to hold elder vampires, even at full strength. Selene pulled explosive charges from her tactical vest. Military-grade C4, courtesy of her contacts in the underground weapons trade. She planted them at the door's hinges and weak points, working with the speed of someone who'd breached 100 secure locations. The charges detonated, blowing the door inward with a concussion that shook the entire level. Selene was through before the smoke cleared, pistols raised, scanning for threats. The containment cells lined both sides of the corridor, most empty now. But at the far end, behind UV-reinforced glass, Eve sat with her knees drawn to her chest, eyes wide with fear and relief. "Mom." Selene's enhanced strength tore the cell door open. The UV barriers were designed to keep vampires out, not hybrids with her specific genetic profile. She pulled Eve into her arms, checking for injuries with the frantic efficiency of a mother who'd just gotten her child back. "Are you hurt? Did they—" "I'm okay," Eve said, but her voice was shaking. "But Mom, he's here, the armored man. He's coming." "I know." Selene set Eve down. keeping herself between her daughter and the corridor. "We're leaving, right now. There's an emergency exit on this level that leads to..." The Slayer appeared in the doorway. His entrance was silent except for the soft sound of boots on concrete. He stood at the threshold, visor scanning the space, weapons ready but not raised. With the same posture he'd shown in Bratislava, ready to fight but not actively engaging. Selene's pistols came up, UV rounds chambered and ready. At this range, she could put 12 shots into his visor before he could draw. Might not kill him, but it would give her time to run with Eve. "Stay back," she commanded, her voice hard. "I don't want to fight you, but I will." The Slayer's helmet tilted, considering. His scanning device emerged, hologram painting both Selene and Eve in three-dimensional analysis. The data scrolled past. Genetic profiles, threat assessments, relationship dynamics. Then the hologram shifted, showing something else. Facility schematics. Specifically, level 6, the deepest level, one that hadn't appeared on any of the intelligence Selene had accessed. The hologram zoomed in on a section labeled Dimensional Research Laboratory. And in that laboratory, energy readings that made Selene's blood run cold. The same dimensional signatures that had preceded the demon portal at the monastery. "They're trying to open a rift," Selene whispered, understanding flooding through her. Antigen is experimenting with dimensional breaches. The Slayer's hologram confirmed it. Security footage from level 6 showed scientists in protective gear working with equipment that crackled with crimson energy. They'd been studying the residual signatures from the monastery portal, trying to replicate the technology, trying to harness whatever power had allowed demons to cross between dimensions. And they were close to succeeding. Eve pressed against Selene's side, staring at the hologram. "They're going to bring the demons here? On purpose?" The Slayer's visor turned to a different monitor feed. Dr. Sarah Chen in the observation deck, watching her facility burn, but her attention fixed on the level 6 laboratory. Even now, with her security forces decimated and her research subjects escaping, she wasn't evacuating. She was protecting something. The dimensional research was more important to her than survival. "She doesn't understand what she's dealing with," Selene said quietly. "She thinks demons are just another thing to study, to weaponize. She has no idea what she'll unleash." The Slayer's combat protocols were clear. Demons were absolute priority. Antigen's human personnel were secondary threats. The vampires and Lycans were reclassified as non-hostile unless provoked. But this changed the calculus. But if Antigen succeeded in opening a stable rift, Hell would have a permanent foothold in this reality. Every demon in existence would pour through. The slaughter at the monastery would be nothing compared to a full-scale invasion. He needed to destroy the dimensional research. Needed to ensure Antigen couldn't complete their experiments. And that meant going to level 6. But between him and level 6 stood Selene, still protective of Eve, still uncertain of his intentions. The Slayer lowered his weapons, not holstered, just lowered, barrels pointing at the floor. Then he did something he hadn't done in eons. He stepped aside, clearing the path to the exit. The gesture was unmistakable. "Take your daughter and go. This doesn't concern you." Selene stared at him, her tactical mind racing through scenarios. He could kill them both if he wanted. Could have done it in Bratislava. Could do it now. But he wasn't. He was letting them leave, because his priority was the demons, not them. "The laboratory," Selene said slowly. "If you're going to destroy it, you'll need to get past their final security measures. Level 6 has automated defenses that make the upper levels look primitive. Heavy weapons platforms, biological containment protocols, self-destruct systems that could level the entire facility. The Slayer's helmet tilted. Processing. I have the access codes. Selene continued. I pulled them from Antigen's network during a raid 6 months ago. I can get you past the automated defenses straight to the laboratory. She was offering alliance, temporary cooperation against a mutual threat. It went against every instinct she'd developed over centuries of surviving through isolation and suspicion. But if Antigen opened a hell portal in the middle of Prague, everyone, vampire, Lycan, human, would suffer. The Slayer considered this. Tactically sound. Selene's knowledge of the facility would reduce complications, and her hybrid abilities meant she could handle herself in combat, wouldn't become a liability. He nodded once. Acceptance. Mom, no, Eve protested. You can't trust him. He killed so many. He killed people he thought were demons, Selene said gently, kneeling to Eve's level. But we're not demons, and neither are the scientists, even if they're doing monstrous things. He knows that now. She looked up at the armored figure. Don't you? The Slayer's visor met her gaze. His scanning device projected one final hologram. Comparative analysis between demons and humans, vampires and Lycans, infected beings and genuinely corrupted beings. The classifications were clear now, updated, refined. He knew the difference. You're not going to slaughter everyone in that laboratory, Selene said. It wasn't a question. Just the ones who fight back. And you're going to destroy the dimensional equipment so they can't try this again. Another nod. Confirmation of intent. Selene turned to David over the comm channel. I need you at the Prague facility, level 5 containment wing. I'm sending Eve up. Get her out of here and somewhere safe. Selene, what are you? I'm making sure Antigen doesn't open a door to hell. Literally. She handed Eve her backup pistol, a small 9mm loaded with regular ammunition. Go with David. If anyone tries to stop you, you shoot them. Understand? Eve nodded, tears streaming down her face, but her expression set with determination beyond her years. She looked at the Slayer one last time, then ran toward the exit. Selene watched her daughter disappear into the corridor, then turned to the armored figure beside her. Level 6 is through the maintenance shaft at the end of this hall. The automated defenses activate the moment they detect unauthorized entry. I can override them, but it'll take 30 seconds. Can you keep them busy for 30 seconds? The Slayer maglocked his plasma rifle and withdrew the super shotgun, loading it with shells that gleamed with a faint greenish glow. Armor-piercing, demon-killing ammunition that would work just as well on automated turrets. He could keep them busy. Mesa, one more thing, Selene said as they began moving toward the maintenance shaft. If we survive this, if we stop Antigen from opening that portal, you stop hunting my people. Vampires, Lycans, we're not your enemies. The real enemies are the ones trying to tear holes between dimensions. The Slayer paused at the shaft entrance, looking down into the darkness where level 6 waited. His mission parameters had been absolute for so long. Kill demons, destroy hell, eliminate corruption wherever it appeared. But this world was different. The monsters here were complicated. Some were victims, some were predators. Some were just trying to survive. And the real threat, the actual demons, were still out there, testing the barriers between realities, looking for weaknesses to exploit. He needed allies, needed intelligence, and needed to understand this world's complexities if he was going to protect it from Hell's invasion. The Slayer extended his gauntleted hand. Selene stared at it for a moment, understanding the significance. An alliance, a partnership between the most feared death dealer in vampire history and a demon killer from another dimension. She clasped his hand. The grip was firm, professional, a warrior's agreement. "Let's go kill some scientists," Selene said grimly, "and save the world from its own stupidity." They dropped into the shaft together, descending toward level 6, toward Dr. Sarah Chen's desperate experiments, toward machinery that was already tearing holes in reality's fabric. Behind them, Antigen's facility burned. Above them, Eve fled toward safety. Around them, freed immortals streamed into the Prague night, spreading word of the armored figure who'd liberated them. And somewhere in the spaces between dimensions, Hell's scouts watched the chaos and smiled. The Doomslayer had just made his first ally in this reality, which meant Hell needed to accelerate its plans before the Alliance could grow stronger. The invasion was coming, and this time, it wouldn't be a dozen demons testing the waters. This time, Hell would bring an army. In the observation deck, Dr. Sarah Chen watched Seline and the Slayer descend toward her laboratory, and she made a decision that would doom them all. "Activate the dimensional gateway," she ordered into her comm. "Full power, bring it online now." "Doctor, the calculations aren't complete. We don't know what will come through." "I know exactly what will come through," Sarah said, her eyes gleaming with the fanaticism of someone who'd crossed the line from science into madness. "Power, evolution, the next stage of human advancement. And when it arrives, it will deal with our armored problem for us." She pressed the activation sequence. Deep in level 6, machinery that should never have been built roared to life, tearing a new wound in the fabric of reality. Hell had been knocking on the door. Sarah Chen had just opened it. The dimensional machinery on level 6 wasn't a single device, but an array of power conduits, focusing lenses, and containment rings built around a central chamber. It pulsed with a deep, malevolent red light, the same crimson that had tinted the air at the monastery rift. The hum it emitted was felt more than heard, a vibration that drilled into the bones and twisted the stomach. Sarah Chen stood behind the final barrier, a wall of transparent polymer designed to withstand chemical attacks and high explosives. Through it, she watched her creation awaken, her expression a mixture of triumph and terror. "Power levels at 60% and climbing," reported the chief technician, his voice shaking. "The resonance is stable. We've established a preliminary anchor point in the interstitial space. But Doctor, the energy signature, it's not just radiation. Its reading is biological." "Of course it is," Sarah whispered, mesmerized by the swirling vortex of light forming in the central chamber. The rift at the monastery wasn't just a tear in space-time. It was a doorway to a living dimension, a biosphere of pure aggression and evolution. Her eyes were locked on the display, showing the Slayer's descent. And he's the apex predator from that biosphere. We're not just opening a door to energy, we're opening a door to an ecosystem, one that we can study, harvest, and ultimately control. The Slayer and Selene dropped from the maintenance shaft onto a grated catwalk overlooking the massive laboratory. The air here was thick with the smell of ozone, hot metal, and something worse. The faint, cloying scent of sulfur and spoiled meat. The calling card of hell. Below them, a dozen scientists in full hazard suits scrambled around the machinery. Automated defenses were already tracking them. Plasma turrets descended from the ceiling on articulated arms, their barrels glowing with a cold blue light. Heavy security doors began sealing the exits. "There," Selene said, pointing to a terminal jutting from the catwalk railing. "The primary override, 30 seconds. She didn't wait for acknowledgement. Sprinting toward it, her fingers already flying over the keypad. The turrets whined as they powered up. Targeting lasers painted red dots on Selene's back. The super shotgun roared twice. The first blast took the nearest turret off its mount, sending it spinning into the machinery below in a shower of sparks. The second obliterated the targeting sensor array of another. The Slayer moved with a predator's economy, each step a pivot, each shot a kill. He didn't waste ammunition on the scientists cowering below. His focus was the machinery and the immediate threats to his temporary ally. Selene's voice was a tense murmur over the klaxons. 18 seconds. They've initiated a core purge protocol. If they overheat the reactors, this whole level goes up. On the other side of the transparent wall, Chen saw her defenses failing. She saw the efficiency of the slaughter, the way the armored figure prioritized threats. He wasn't a mindless beast. He was a tactician, a soldier, and the hybrid vampire was helping him. A cold fury replaced her scientific curiosity. They weren't just destroying her life's work. They were proving her wrong, proving that her control was an illusion, that the power she sought could not be caged. "Redirect all auxiliary power to the gateway," she screamed into the intercom. "Overload the anchors. We're not just opening a door, we're blowing it off its hinges." "Doctor, that will collapse the containment field. We won't be able to control what comes through." "I don't want to control it anymore," Sarah hissed, her eyes wide. "I want to unleash it." The central chamber of the machine flared from crimson to blinding white. The hum became a shriek. The transparent wall vibrated violently. On the catwalk, Seline punched the final key. "Got it! Turrets are offline. Security doors are..." The world tore open. It wasn't like the monastery. That had been a clean, surgical rip. This was a violent, explosive birth. The central chamber didn't just open a portal, it detonated into one. A wave of force flattened the scientists below, pulping them against their consoles. The catwalk beneath Seline and the Slayer buckled, steel groaning in protest. Through the expanding maw of white light and black static, things began to emerge. Not just imps and hell knights. A cacodemon, a floating sphere of fanged flesh and furious eye, bobbed into the lab, its acidic saliva dripping and eating through the floor. Behind it, armored forms clanked forward, Mancubi, their belly-mounted cannons already swelling with infernal fire. And at the center, something larger stirred in the depths of the portal, something that made the very air shudder. The gateway wasn't just open, it was stable. And it was big enough for Hell's heavier infantry. The Slayer's HUD lit up with a cascading waterfall of threat identifications. His systems, on silent for hours, sang with recognition. Targets, true targets. The rage, banked and confused by the complexities of this world, roared back to life in his chest, pure and perfect and righteous. He didn't look at Seline. He didn't need to. The mission was clear. He leaped from the collapsing catwalk, landing amidst the emerging demons with a ground-shaking impact. The super shotgun was in his hands. Then it wasn't. Replaced by the plasma rifle as a mancubus fired a volley of fireballs. He strafed, the searing projectiles passing close enough to scorch his armor. The plasma rifle answered, bolts of blue fire punching into the demon's bloated torso until it burst in a shower of gore and flame. Seline, left on the catwalk, watched for a split second. This was beyond her. This was a war from another reality, spilling into hers. Her UV rounds and silver blades were toys against these things. But the Slayer was already surrounded, a circle of closing horrors, and he was between them and the portal. He was trying to contain it. A Hell Knight charged him from the left. The Slayer turned, but a Cacodemon's energy bolt slammed into his shoulder from the right, staggering him. The knight's fist connected, a blow that would have reduced a tank to scrap metal. The Slayer skidded back, his shields flaring violently. He was powerful. He was death incarnate. But he was one, and hell was infinite. Selene made her choice. She wasn't a demon killer, but she was a soldier, and she recognized a holding action when she saw one. She vaulted over the railing, drawing her pistols. She landed on a control console, her enhanced legs absorbing the impact. A stray imp, unscuttling from the main fray, leaped at her. She put 3 UV rounds into its face. It screeched, the holy energy burning it in a way plasma did not, and fell. It wasn't dead, but it was hurt. Her weapons could hurt them. She had a role. Cleanup, flank protection. She began moving in a wide arc, putting precise fire into the lesser demons that tried to swarm the Slayer's periphery, drawing their attention, dividing their focus. The Slayer registered the tactical shift. The vampire was engaging, her fire less lethal than his, but disruptive. It created openings. As a cacodemon turned to spit at Selene, he put a shotgun blast into its massive eye. It exploded. The alliance, forged in a corridor minutes before, was baptized in hellfire and gore. Inside her observation nook, Sarah Chen watched her victory turn to ash. The demons weren't focusing on the Slayer, they were spreading. An imp clawed its way up the polymer wall, staring at her with mindless hunger. A Hell Knight, ignoring the fight, began pounding on the reinforced door to her sanctuary. She had summoned the flood, but she had no arc. "Close it!" she screamed into the dead intercom. "Close the gateway." But the machinery was gone, consumed by the very energy it had channeled. The portal was self-sustaining now, a weeping wound in reality. And something was coming through it. The large shape resolved itself, stepping into the ruined lab with a weight that cracked the concrete foundation. A baron of hell. 15 feet of corded muscle covered in barbed armor, its head a horned nightmare, its hands ending in claws that could shred battleship plating. It roared, almost a sound of pure malice that drowned out all other noise. Its eyes, burning like coals, fixed not on the Slayer, but on the source of the unfamiliar energy, Selene. It charged, moving with terrifying speed for its size. The Slayer saw the trajectory. He was grappling with a mancubus, ripping its cannon arm from its socket. He wouldn't reach the Baron in time. Selene saw death coming. She fired her entire magazine into the Baron's face. The UV rounds sparked harmlessly against its armored brow. She dove aside as a massive claw swept through the space she'd occupied, tearing through solid steel like paper. The Baron turned, preparing to finish her. It raised its claw for a crushing blow. The chainsaw screamed. The Slayer had abandoned the mancubus, crossing the distance in a blur. He hit the Baron from the side, not with a weapon, but with his body, a spear tackle of armored fury that knocked the giant demon off balance. Before it could recover, he revved the chainsaw and buried it in the Baron's thigh. Thick, black ichor sprayed. The Baron bellowed in pain and backhanded the Slayer, sending him crashing through a bank of servers. The Slayer rolled to his feet, shaking his head, his HUD flickering from the impact. He'd drawn its attention. The Baron forgot Selene, now fully focused on the ancient enemy. This was the dance the Slayer knew. The brutal, primal exchange of violence with Hell's champions. The Baron lunged. The Slayer sidestepped, the crucible blade flashing into his hand. The demonic energy of the sword met the infernal flesh of the Baron in a shower of sparks as he parried a claw strike. Selene, from her knees, saw the battle unfold, and it was a clash of titans, a spectacle of destruction that leveled the remains of the laboratory. But she also saw the smaller demons, still pouring from the portal. The Slayer was holding the line against the champion, but the line was crumbling around the edges. More imps, another Hell Knight. The gateway was widening. They couldn't win by just fighting what came through. They had to close the door. Her eyes scanned the devastation, looking for anything resembling a control system, a power source, a weak point. Then she saw it. On the far side of the chamber, mostly buried under debris, was the primary energy conduit. A thick column of crystalline material throbbing with the stolen, corrupted power that fed the portal. It was shielded, but the shield generators were damaged, sparking fitfully. "The conduit!" she yelled over the din. "I'm pointing. Destroy that. It might collapse the rift." The Slayer, locked in a contest of strength with the Baron, shoved the demon back with a surge of power. His visor flicked to the conduit, then back to the Baron. The calculation was instantaneous. He couldn't disengage. He looked at Selene. Then he jerked his head toward the conduit. "You." The command was clear. He would hold the Baron. She had to make the shot. Selene didn't hesitate. She sprinted across the chaotic battlefield, weaving between lesser demons, using her agility to avoid their grasping claws. An imp lunged at her. She put her last UV round between its eyes and kept moving. The conduit was ahead, protected by a flickering energy field. She had no heavy weapons. Her pistols were empty. All she had were fragmentation grenades on her belt. Would they be enough? A Hell Knight cut her off, roaring. She skidded to a halt. Before it could attack, a hail of plasma fire tore into its back. The Slayer, still grappling with the Baron, had fired his rifle one-handed, the sustained burst melting the knight's spine. It fell, twitching. The path was clear. Selene reached the conduit. The energy field sparked, weak but still present. She pulled all 3 grenades from her belt, armed them, and shoved them into a cracked section of the shielding at the conduit's base. "Fire in the hole," she screamed, though only the Slayer could hear, and she doubted he cared. She turned and ran, diving behind a collapsed structural beam. The explosion was a sharp, concussive crump, distinct from the hellish sounds around it. The crystalline conduit shattered with a sound like a giant glass bell breaking. The light streaming into the portal flickered, dimmed. The Baron of Hell, sensing the shift, redoubled its efforts, trying to crush the Slayer and reach the failing gateway. The Slayer gave no ground. He dropped his rifle, grabbed the Baron by its horns, and drove his armored forehead into the demon's snout. Bone cracked. The portal shuddered. It began to contract, the edges curling in like burning paper. The demons still in the lab shrieked, some trying to flee back into the closing maw, others going into a mindless frenzy. With a final, soundless implosion, the gateway collapsed. The last flicker of hell light vanished, leaving only the emergency lights and the fires of battle. The Baron of Hell, severed from its source, let out a final, ragged roar of defiance. The Slayer answered. The crucible blade flashed upward, shearing through the Baron's jaw and into its skull. The demon stiffened, then dissolved into ash and fading embers. Silence, sudden and profound, fell over the devastated level 6. Only the crackle of fires and the drip of ruptured pipes remained. The Slayer stood amidst the carnage, chest heaving slightly, the crucible blade still humming in his hand. He looked across the wreckage at Selene, who was pulling herself from behind the beam, covered in dust and demon ichor. He gave a single, slow nod. The alliance had held. The immediate threat was gone. But in her shattered observation room, Dr. Sarah Chen, the last human alive on level 6, pressed her hand against the polymer wall. It was scarred and cracked. On the other side, the Slayer's visor turned toward her. His gaze was not one of victory, or rage, or even judgment, and it was the empty, indifferent stare of a natural force. a hurricane looking at a broken tree. He took a step toward her sanctuary. Chen closed her eyes, a smile of bitter understanding on her lips. She had opened the door to hell to gain power. She had succeeded, and hell, in the form of its greatest enemy, had come to collect its due. The silence after the portal's collapse was not peaceful. It was the hollow, ringing quiet of a tomb after a cataclysm. The air remained thick with the stench of sulfur, ozone, and burned meat. Fires guttered and shattered machinery, casting erratic shadows that danced across the Slayer's angular armor as he stood over the dissipating ashes of the Baron. His visor lifted from the remains, scanning the ruined laboratory. Threat detection registered 0 biological hostiles, only structural instability and one human life sign behind the compromised polymer wall. Selene climbed to her feet, wincing as she put weight on a twisted ankle that was already beginning to knit itself back together. She watched the Slayer turn his attention to the observation nook. There was no hesitation in his movement, no theatrical menace. He simply walked toward it, a force of nature proceeding to the next point of instability. "Wait," Selene called out, her voice hoarse from smoke and strain. He paused, his head tilting a fraction. "She's human," Selene said, limping forward. "A monster yet, but a human monster." This was her judgment. She gestured at the carnage around them, the smoldering bodies of scientists crushed by their own creation, the twisted remains of demons. She wanted to play God with forces she didn't understand, and she lost. Let the courts have her. Let her live with what she's done. The Slayer's gaze remained fixed on the cracked polymer, behind which Chen was a shrinking silhouette. His internal calculus was cold and efficient. Chen, human, scientist, willingly engaged in dimensional experimentation with hostile entities. It's a knowledge base, extreme risk. Probability of recidivism, high. Threat classification, amber crimson, a corruptor, a would-be summoner. In the Doom universe, the UAC scientists who opened the gates to hell had been given due process. It had meant nothing. They had been puppets, then victims, then monsters themselves. Process was irrelevant in the face of existential corruption. He raised the super shotgun. "No!" Selene stepped into his line of fire, not in front of the barrel, but beside it, forcing him to look at her. "This isn't hell. Our rules are different. We have laws, consequences. If you just execute her in cold blood, you become what the vampires and Lycans feared, an indiscriminate killer. You proved Thomas and Quint right. The names meant nothing to him, but the principle did. He was recalibrating, and this world's demons were not demons. This world's corruptors were not possessed by hellish will. They were driven by human ambition, a toxin he understood, but which operated on a different scale. His finger rested on the trigger. The amber crimson classification pulsed in his HUD. Behind the wall, Chen did something unexpected. She didn't cower. She reached for the damaged console beside her and slapped a large red button. A heavy thunk echoed through the level, followed by the distinct sound of hydraulic pistons disengaging. The entire observation nook, a self-contained module, detached from the wall with a screech of tearing metal. Emergency thrusters on its base flared, and it shot backward through a newly revealed shaft. An escape pod system Selene's stolen schematics hadn't revealed. The Slayer tracked the pod's trajectory with his weapons, but it was gone in seconds, vanishing up into the facility's superstructure. "She's running to the surface," Selene said, a growl in her voice. She tapped her comm. "David, Eve secure?" "Secure and away." David's voice came back, tight with relief. "The facility is emptying. Antigen personnel are fleeing like rats. Military and police frequencies are going crazy. They're calling this a massive industrial accident and terrorist event. Forget them. A woman, Dr. Sarah Chen, just launched an escape pod from the deep lab. Track it. I want her. On it. Selene, the armored one. What's his status? Selene looked at the Slayer, who was still watching the empty shaft. He's standing down. For now. The Slayer's internal sensors pinged. A new alert, not from the facility, but from his long-range dimensional scanners. The collapse of the main portal had sent ripples through the local reality. Like aftershocks following an earthquake, smaller, unstable micro-rifts were flickering into existence across Prague. Dozens of them. Weak, temporary, but each one was a potential breach point for scout demons, a way for Hell to gather intelligence and establish new anchors. The main invasion had been thwarted. The infestation had begun. He turned from the escape shaft and began walking toward the nearest stairwell. "Where are you going?" Seline asked. He didn't answer. He pulled up a holographic map on his gauntlet, displaying Prague. Dozens of crimson dots pulsed across the cityscape, the micro-rifts. He enlarged one cluster in the Old Town district and showed it to her. Selene's blood ran cold. "Sus more portals?" He nodded, then pointed at the map, and then at himself. The message was clear. My mission continues. The hunt continues. You can't cover all of those alone. The city is huge, panicked. You'll be walking into a military cordon. The Slayer seemed to consider this. He zoomed the map out. The micro-rifts were scattered, but they followed a pattern, converging on locations of high electromagnetic activity, historical sites with residual psychic energy, and Antigen satellite offices. Hell was probing, using the residual energy from Chen's experiment and the blueprint of her research to find the softest spots. He looked at Selene, then at the map. He highlighted 3 major rift clusters. Then he pointed a gauntleted finger at her. The offer, or perhaps the order, was implicit. You cover one. Selene stared at the map, and then at the ashes of demons around her. She thought of Eve, safe because this creature had shown restraint, and because she had helped him. She thought of the endless circular war with the Lycans, a conflict that now seemed pathetically small. A real enemy, an existential one, was here, and it didn't care about bloodlines or territories. It consumed everything. She was a death dealer. Her purpose was to protect her kind from extinction. That purpose had just expanded to include protecting her world. I'll take the cluster in the industrial sector, she said, her voice firming into command. Fewer civilians. I can move freely there. But I don't have weapons that can kill those things efficiently. The Slayer looked at her empty pistols, then at the smoldering corpse of a Hell Knight. He walked over to it, ignoring the heat, and wrenched a jagged, blackened piece of shin armor free. It was thick, crude, and radiated a faint, hostile energy. He tossed it to her. Then, he reached to his own belt. One clipped a small rectangular device, a portable plasma cutter, a tool for breaching and repair. He modified the energy setting with a few quick taps on its interface, then handed it to her as well. It was heavier than her pistols, awkward. But when she tentatively aimed it at a piece of wreckage and pressed the trigger, a short, focused beam of blue plasma shot forth, melting through metal. It would cut through demon flesh. A trade, she said, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. She pulled a small data drive from her vest, a complete copy of Antigen's European operations, including safe houses, research outposts, and corrupted officials. Everything we have on the human elements that might try this again, or that might try to stop you. The Slayer took the drive and slotted it into his armor. Intel. a weapon against future summoners. The alliance was no longer temporary, it was operational. "How do we coordinate?" Selene asked. The Slayer tapped the side of his helmet, then pointed at her comm unit. He transmitted a burst of encrypted data. Her earpiece crackled. Then a new, harsh, synthetic voice filled it, translated from his systems. "Channel secured. Frequency follows demonic energy signatures. I will monitor." The voice was utterly emotionless, a machine parsing meaning. "Understood," Selene said. "Good hunting." The Slayer gave one last nod, then turned and broke into a run, a blur of green armor disappearing up the stairwell, Salmak already tracking the strongest rift signature. Selene took a deep breath, the weight of the plasma cutter solid in her hand. She tapped her comm. "David, new plan. I need a fast vehicle at the North Service exit, and mobilize every death dealer and allied Lycan you can contact. Not for the old war, for a new one. Tell them the night just got a lot darker, and we need every blade that can cut the shadows." Above ground, Prague was in chaos. The industrial accident at the Antigen facility had been a series of deep, ground-shaking explosions. Now, strange lights were flickering in alleyways. People were reporting horrific, brief sightings of creatures that vanished in puffs of smoke. Police and military units were scrambling, their communications jammed with confusion. On a rooftop overlooking the Charles Bridge, the Slayer surveyed the largest micro-rift. It hovered over the river, a shimmering, man-sized tear that pulsed like a sick heart. Through it, the Gothic spires of the city were distorted, as if seen through a heat haze. Two imps had already come through, crouched on the bridge's ancient stones, sniffing the air, confused by the unfamiliar world. They wouldn't be confused for long. The Slayer dropped from the rooftop, landing between them. The super shotgun spoke twice, and the night swallowed the sounds. The imps were reduced to ash before they could scream. He approached the rift. It was unstable, already fading. He could close it with a focused energy pulse from his suit. But he didn't. Instead, he extended a scanner. He needed data. He needed to trace the resonance back to its source in hell, and to identify the power behind this probing attack. As he scanned, his motion tracker pinged. Not demons, humans, military. A squad in full tactical gear was advancing across the bridge, weapons trained on him. "Unidentified entity, stand down and drop your weapons. This is your only warning." The squad leader's voice was amplified, tense. They saw a figure in alien armor standing over two piles of ash, next to a crackling energy anomaly. Their training had no frame of reference for this. The Slayer ignored them, finishing his scan. "I repeat, stand down or we will fire." He stored the data and turned toward the rift, raising his arm to dispel it. A nervous trooper, seeing the sudden movement, opened fire. A 3-round burst of 5.56mm rounds sparked against the Slayer's shoulder armor. The shields didn't even flare, and it was less than an insect bite. But it was an attack. The Slayer's head turned. The crimson visor locked onto the soldier who had fired. The entire squad froze, a primal fear seizing them that had nothing to do with training manuals. He could kill them all in under 2 seconds. They were in his way. They had attacked him. His new protocols, the ones forged with Seline, presented a choice. Human, military. Following orders, misinformed. Threat level, negligible. He made his choice. He turned back to the micro-rift and fired a controlled plasma burst into its center. The rift imploded with a sound like a sigh, vanishing. Then, instead of engaging the soldiers, he turned and ran, leaping over the side of the bridge into the dark waters of the Vltava below, disappearing before they could process what had happened. He left them alive, unconfused, and terrified. A story to tell, a legend beginning to spread. He emerged downstream, climbing a stone embankment. His sensors led him to the next signature, a smaller rift in the basement of an old church. A single imp was trying to claw its way out of a stained glass window. A quick shotgun blast from the shadows solved the problem. He was a ghost, moving through the panic-stricken city, a swift and silent purge. Close the rift. Eliminate any demons that made it through. Avoid human military engagement unless absolutely necessary. In the industrial sector, Selene's voice crackled over the secure channel, strained. Cluster Alpha contained. 3 hostiles eliminated. The plasma cutter works. Civilians are confused. The police are setting up a perimeter. The Slayer acknowledged with a grunt, already moving to the next point. His map showed the micro rifts were being closed, but the rate was slowing. They were flickering into existence faster than he could eliminate them. Hell was adapting, probing more aggressively. Then, a new alert. Not a micro rift. A concentrated, powerful energy spike from the outskirts of the city. The same signature as Sarah Chen's escape pod. It wasn't a rift signature. It was a broadcast. A powerful, directed transmission being fired not into hell, but outward, into deep space. Laced with dimensional coordinates and fragments of the Slayer's own biometric data. Chen wasn't just hiding, she was calling for help. And she wasn't calling to humans. The Slayer stopped on a rooftop, analyzing the signal. It was a hail, aimed at something else. Something that traveled the void between stars. Something that might find the scent of a god-killer irresistible. The calculus shifted again. Sarah Chen was no longer just a corruptor. She was a beacon, a lighthouse summoning predators to a wounded world. Her threat classification in his HUD burned solid, unwavering crimson, priority target. The broadcast originated from a lone communications array atop a forested hill 20 kilometers outside Prague. It was an old, Cold War-era listening post, long abandoned by conventional military, now humming with stolen Antigen tech. Power cables snaked from a hastily parked escape pod into the dilapidated facility, and the dish antenna groaned as it tracked across the stars. Inside, Sarah Chen worked with the frantic energy of someone who had burned every bridge behind her. Monitors displayed the signal, a repeating packet containing the dimensional resonance of the collapsed portal, energy signatures of the demons, and most prominently, the Slayer's armor emissions and combat biometrics. It was a bounty notice etched across the electromagnetic spectrum. "Come on," she whispered, her fingers flying over a keyboard. "Someone out there has to be listening. Someone who knows what this is." She wasn't trying to reopen a door to hell. She'd learned that lesson in Fire and Blood. She was aiming higher, farther. Antigen's deep space monitoring had occasionally picked up anomalous signals, non-human in origin. If hell was one predatory ecosystem in the multiverse, there had to be others. Others that might see the Slayer not as a threat, but as rival prey, or as a weapon to be claimed. Her plan was simple. Lure a greater power to Earth. Let it engage the Slayer. In the chaos, she would scavenge the remains of both. It was the ultimate high-risk experiment. Her console beeped. The transmission had been received. Not bounced back, not lost to the void. Received and acknowledged by a transponder code that made her blood run cold with triumph. It was a string of symbols that mirrored, with an unsettling symmetry, some of the angular markings on the Slayer's own armor. She had thrown a stone into the dark ocean of space. Something had stirred. "The beacon is live. I have a vector." The Slayer's synthesized voice was flat in Selene's ear. A location coordinate followed, superimposed on her mental map of the city. Target, Chen. New variable. Extra-dimensional hail confirmed. Intercept imperative. Selene was in the basement of a textile factory, the acrid smell of burned fur and ozone clinging to her. Her borrowed plasma cutter smoked in her hand, its power cell nearly drained. 3 more imps were ash at her feet, and a flickering micro-rift sizzled out behind her. She was exhausted in a way she hadn't been in decades, not just physically, but existentially. The night was endless. Understood. But the rifts here are still opening. If we both go after her, the city, secondary protocol activated. Before she could ask, a new voice, gruff and wary, broke into the channel. Death Dealer, this is Quint. Do you read? Selene froze. The Lycan Alpha, the one whose safe house had been massacred. I read. How are you on this channel? The thing gave us the frequency, Quint growled. Sent it in a data burst to every encrypted immortal network we have. It came with schematics for weapon modifications. Using demon remains as conductive elements, it says there are more breaches. Selene's mind reeled. The Slayer wasn't just working with her. He was mobilizing the entire immortal population of Prague. He was turning the centuries-old war machine of vampires and Lycans against a common alien foe. Where are you? Old Town. My pack and some of Thomas's surviving death dealers are holding a square. These things, they keep boiling out of thin air. But the mods work. Their blood burns them. There was a savage satisfaction in his voice. Turns out we're good at killing monsters. Who knew? A fragile, unbelievable alliance was forming in the crucible of Hell's probing invasion, united not by peace, but by a greater hatred. Hold your positions, Selene said, her own strategy shifting. Contain and eliminate. I have another target. The human who started this? Yes. Kill her slowly, Quint said, and the channel went silent. The Slayer moved like a thunderbolt through the countryside. He ignored roads, cutting a straight line through forest and field. The Praetor suit's systems were at maximum combat readiness, but a new alert blinked at the edge of his HUD. The transponder response Chen had received was being actively decrypted. It wasn't a language. It was a mathematical proof of hostility, a declaration of hunting rights. And it contained a timestamp, an estimated arrival window. He had less than an hour before the beacon's recipient arrived. The listening post came into view. He didn't bother with stealth. He scanned the facility. One human life sign, no demonic signatures, no energy shields beyond the building's structure. He raised the plasma rifle and vaporized the front doors. Sarah Chen spun in her chair, not with fear, but with a scientist's morbid curiosity. She saw him fill the doorway, a specter of green metal and crimson light painted by the glow of her monitors. "You're faster than I calculated," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "The efficiency of your locomotion is remarkable. Is it purely muscular, or does the suit provide motive force?" The Slayer advanced, his boots crunching on debris. His scanner washed over her, confirming no hidden weapons, no traps. Just a woman and her machines. "You're here to stop the broadcast," she continued, nodding to the main console where the signal pulsed rhythmically. "It's too late. The handshake is complete. They're coming. A species the Antigen deep-range telescopes called the Unseen. Energy-based life forms that consume dimensional instability. You and your hellish enemies. You're a dinner bell to them." She smiled, a brittle, broken thing. "I couldn't control the demons. So I called something that can. You can kill me. But in roughly 47 minutes, Earth will have new visitors. And they'll be looking for you. The Slayer stopped before her. He looked from her face to the console. His priority tree was clear. Terminate the beacon. Terminate the beacon keeper. Then prepare for the new hostiles. He raised his arm, the plasma rifle's barrel centering on her forehead. Wait. The bravado cracked, revealing the raw terror beneath. You need me. I can shut it down. I built a kill switch, a resonant counter-frequency that will collapse the signal and make this location inert to their sensors. She was lying. Her biometrics spiked with deception. She had no kill switch. She was stalling, hoping the cavalry she'd summoned would arrive in time. The Slayer's finger began to take up the trigger's slack. Then Selene's voice, urgent, tore through the channel. Slayer, we have a problem in the city. The micro-rifts. They're not random. They're forming a pattern, a convergence point. It's at the Antigen facility's ruins. The residual energy from the big portal. It's acting as a catalyst. A holographic map from her feed projected from his gauntlet. She was right. The scattered rifts were mobile, drifting like glowing embers on a spectral wind, all being drawn back to the epicenter of the original breach. Hell wasn't just probing. It was consolidating. It was trying to reignite the main gateway using the scattered energy of the failed micro-rifts. A choice, stark and immediate. Kill Chen and stop the extra-dimensional hail, but risk Hell re-establishing a stable beachhead in the heart of the city. Or let Chen live for now and stop the second demonic invasion. For a being of singular purpose, the path was obvious. Hell was the eternal enemy. The unseen were an unknown, future threat. Chen was a static variable. He lowered the rifle from Chen's head and instead fired a single, precise plasma bolt into the main transmission console. It exploded in a shower of sparks and molten silicon. The rhythmic pulse of the beacon died instantly. The dish antenna ground to a halt. Chen stared at the wreckage, her life work gone. You idiot. You just stranded us here with no defense against what's coming. The Slayer turned his back on her. He pulled a small disc-like device from his belt, a portable energy dampener. He slapped it onto the wall. It glowed, emitting a field that would scramble most technological signals and lock basic mechanical systems. It wouldn't hold a determined enemy, but it would cage one human scientist. Oh, he looked at Chen one last time, the meaning clear. Stay here. Your fate will be decided later. Then he was gone. A green streak disappearing into the night, heading back toward the glowing wound of Prague. Chen sank to her knees amidst the smoking ruins of her console. The silence was absolute. She had gambled everything and lost. The beacon was dead. Her unseen saviors would never find the signal now. She was alone, trapped in a dead facility, waiting for either the demons to overrun the world or for the armored god to return and finish what he started. She began to laugh, a hollow, hopeless sound that echoed in the empty listening post. The ruins of the Antigen facility were a war zone. The convergence was visible to the naked eye. Streams of crimson energy, like ethereal rivers, flowed through the air from across the city, pouring into the shattered pit of Level 6. Above the crater, the air shimmered and boiled, a new portal struggling to form. It was smaller than Chen's, but denser, more focused. And around its edges, the battlefield of the old war had found new purpose. Seline stood back to back with David on one side of the crater. On another, Quint, in full hybrid form, fought beside Thomas, the vampire elder, their mutual hatred temporarily buried under the need to survive. Death dealers and Lycan fighters, their weapons hastily modified with jagged demon bone shards or wired to captured Antigen energy cells, formed a desperate perimeter. They were no longer killing each other. They were cutting down the endless stream of imps and hell knights that clawed their way from the flickering precursor of the rift. It was a holding action, and they were losing. The air was thick with the roar of beasts, the scream of energy weapons, and the cries of the dying, both immortal and demon. A Hell Knight broke through the Lycan line, heading for Selene. She raised her drained plasma cutter, knowing it was useless. David moved to intercept, but he was too slow. The super shotgun's blast tore the demon in half from behind. The Slayer landed in the center of the crater like a meteor, the impact cracking the concrete. He didn't pause. He assessed the tactical picture in a microsecond. The converging energy streams, the forming rift, the scattered immortal forces barely containing the spillage. His goal wasn't to help them hold. It was to break the convergence. He raised the BFG 9000, but not at the forming rift. He aimed at the streams of energy themselves, in the tributaries feeding the new portal. He fired. The green Argent sphere shot forth, not to impact, but to intercept. It passed through the streams of crimson energy. Where Argent met hell energy, reality screamed. The streams destabilized, writhing like severed tentacles, their flow to the rift disrupted. The forming portal flickered, dimmed. The distraction cost him. A cacodemon, floating unseen above the fray, fired a point-blank energy bolt into his back. His shields flared and failed. The impact drove him to one knee, the armor on his back scorched and smoking. He roared. Not a sound of pain, but of pure, undiluted rage. He turned, launched himself upward with his grapple hook, caught the floating demon, and tore it apart with his bare hands in midair before landing amidst a pack of imps, the crucible blade already sweeping in a deadly arc. He was the tip of the spear, a one-being shock force breaking the demonic momentum. His sudden, violent intervention changed the calculus of the battle. The immortal forces, seeing the tide turn, redoubled their efforts with a ferocity born of survival. Selene, David, Quint. His synthesized voice cut over the shared channel, issuing commands with the authority of a born general. Converge on my position. Push the hostiles back into the energy instability. Force collapse. They obeyed without question. The three leaders, vampire, hybrid, Lycan, coordinated their disparate forces for the first time in history. They became a hammer, and the Slayer was the anvil. Pinned between the relentless push of the immortals and the Slayer's whirlwind of destruction in the crater, and the demonic forces were crushed against the destabilizing energy of the faltering rift. Imps and knights screamed as they were shoved back into the shimmering, chaotic field. The rift, deprived of its energy streams and flooded with destabilized demonic matter, could not sustain itself. With a final, deafening crack that split the night, it imploded. The shockwave threw everyone off their feet. The crimson light vanished, leaving only the normal, polluted glow of the city against the clouds. The demons that remained, cut off from their source, dissolved into ash that was carried away on the wind. Silence returned, deeper and more profound than before. The Slayer stood alone in the center of the crater, smoke rising from his damaged armor. Around the rim, panting, bleeding, but alive, stood the surviving vampires and Lycans. When they stared at each other, then at him, the common enemy that had united them. The immediate invasion was over. Hell's foothold had been erased. But as the Slayer looked up at the sky, his long-range sensors, still tuned to the frequency of Sarah Chen's hail, picked up a new signal, not a broadcast, an inbound trajectory, something moving fast from high orbit, decelerating with technology that bent physics. The timestamp had been wrong. The unseen weren't coming in 47 minutes. They were here. The sky over Prague did not break open with fire and thunder. It shimmered. The clouds, tinged orange by the city's lights, seemed to ripple like disturbed water, then part with silent, impossible grace. Through the aperture descended not a ship of metal, but a vessel of solidified shadow and refracted starlight. It was geometric, crystalline, and utterly silent, hanging a kilometer above the ravaged Antigen facility. From its smooth underbelly, 3 beams of violet light lanced down, not destructive, but inquisitive, scanning the crater, the survivors, and finally coming to rest, converging on the Slayer. A voice filled the air, not through speakers, but directly in the mind of every sentient being in a 5-kilometer radius. It was cold, multi-layered, and devoid of anything resembling emotion. Query: source of transmission. Biometric match confirmed. Entity designate. A series of grinding, non-human syllables. Prime specimen. Claim staked. The Slayer's HUD went berserk. The scanning beams were analyzing him down to his atomic structure. Energy readings from the crystalline ship were off the scale, not hellish, but other. A cold, predatory order opposed to Hell's chaotic rage. These were the unseen, the scavengers Sarah Chen had hoped to lure. They weren't here for Earth. They were here for him. Directive: acquisition. Prepare for harvest. The ground around the Slayer didn't explode. It disassembled. The concrete, rebar, and soil within a 10-meter radius simply broke apart into their component molecules, held in a shimmering violet stasis field. He was trapped in a bubble of unraveled reality, his armor's systems screaming warnings as exotic energy pressed in on his shields. He fought against it, muscles straining against the quantum pressure. He could move, but slowly, as if pushing through molten lead. He raised the plasma rifle, but the beam diffused harmlessly against the inner wall of the field. On the crater rim, Selene watched, horror dawning. This wasn't a fight. It was a collection. David, Quint, target that ship. Anything you have. The immortals, still reeling from the demon battle, reacted. Vampires fired modified rifles. Lycans hurled grenades fitted with demon bone shrapnel. The projectiles rose toward the silent vessel and vanished 100 meters from its hull, absorbed into the same violet energy field. They were gnats buzzing against a starship. The Slayer's analysis was faster than despair. The field was conversion-based, breaking down matter into energy for transport. His Praetor suit's Argent energy core was resisting, creating a feedback loop. He could exploit that. But he needed a power surge, a catastrophic energy release from within the field to overload the conversion matrix. He had one, the BFG 9000 at 97% charge. Firing it inside this confined space would vaporize him. Unless... His eyes, behind the visor, locked onto Selene. He sent a burst of data to her, a schematic, a frequency, a desperate plan. It appeared on the screen of a nearby discarded Antigen tablet she scooped up. She understood instantly. It was insane. "Do it!" Quint roared, seeing her hesitate. "Whatever he needs. That thing is worse than the demons." Selene's fingers flew. She linked her comm to the tablet, accessing the Slayer's suit systems remotely. The schematics showed her how to trigger a full, uncontrolled dump of his suit's Argent energy reserves directly into his shields, creating a momentary, omnidirectional pulse. It would leave him powerless, dead in the water. But for a nanosecond, it would match the frequency of the conversion field. The timing had to be perfect. Warning: resistance detected. Increasing harvest yield. The violet field brightened, constricting. The slayers sank to one knee, the pressure immense. "Now!" Selene screamed, hitting the command. For a fraction of a second, the slayer became a star. Green argent energy exploded from every plate of his armor, a spherical shockwave of pure, reality-bending power. It clashed violently with the violet conversion field. The two incompatible energies didn't cancel each other out. They annihilated. The silent night vanished in a thunderclap of violated physics. The violet field shattered like glass. The concussion wave knocked every immortal in the crater flat. The beams from the ship flickered and died. The Slayer was thrown clear, landing in a heap, his armor dark, the iconic green glow extinguished. He did not move. Above, the crystalline ship seemed to shudder. A crack appeared along its flawless surface. The voice returned, tinged with something new. Not pain, but algorithmic frustration. Anomaly. Specimen defense mechanisms. Unexpected. Re-evaluating. The ship began to reorient, its scans now sweeping the area, reassessing the threat. It was wounded, insulted. Its cold logic was shifting from pure acquisition to tactical consideration. And this was the moment. From the edge of the forest, a single high-velocity projectile streaked upward. It wasn't a missile. It was a specialized communications probe, launched from the abandoned listening post. It carried no warhead. It carried a message, a compressed, looping shriek of data. The complete schematics of the Slayer's armor, his recorded power outputs, and the exact dimensional coordinates of Hell itself, pulled from the ruins of Chen's console. Sarah Chen's final gambit. If she couldn't control the game, she would burn the board. The probe attached itself to the cracked hull of the unseen vessel. The data flooded in. The ship froze. The scanning stopped. For 3 heartbeats, there was only the hum of its engines. Then, the voice returned, cold and decisive. Parameters updated. Conflicting priorities. Prime specimen, high value/high risk, versus dimensional nexus, Hell, infinite biomass/predictable threat. Efficiency dictates, harvest secondary target first, establish beachhead, return for specimen with superior forces. The calculus of a predator. Why fight the apex tiger in its territory when a whole herd of deer was mapped out for you? The crystalline ship began to ascend, its crack sealing as it moved. It turned slowly, aiming not at Earth, but at a point in space where the fabric of reality was still thin and scarred from the day's events. A targeting beam, 1,000 times more powerful than the scanning ones, lanced out, not at the city, but at the dimensional scar left by the collapsed portals. It was trying to open a permanent gate, not to invade Earth, to invade Hell. The Slayer stirred, systems rebooted with agonizing slowness. His vision cleared. He saw the ship, saw the targeting beam boring into the weak point between worlds. He understood. The unseen were going to bypass Earth entirely. They were going to start a war on their own terms in Hell's backyard. An infinite war between 2 endless predatory dimensions. And if they won, if they consumed Hell's energy, they would return for him, stronger than ever. He pushed himself up. His armor was running on minimal backup power. Weapons were offline. Shields were gone. He was reduced to his baseline, an immortal man in a metal shell. But he was still the Doomslayer. He began to walk toward the center of the crater, where the dimensional scar was brightest. The beam from the ship was stabilizing it, widening it. Through the tear, and the fires of Hell were already visible. Seline ran to his side. "What are you doing? You can't stop that." He didn't look at her. He pointed at the tier, then at himself, then made a fist. "You're going in? It's pulling apart. You'll be torn to pieces." He knew the risks. But the mission was clear. Hell was the eternal enemy. This new threat sought to conquer it. He could not allow that. He would not allow another power to control the realm of demons. He would not be harvested. This was not about saving Earth anymore. It was about denying a victory to any force but his own. He reached the edge of the tear. The heat was immense. The screams of distant demons echoed through. The unseen beam pulsed, methodically prying the wound open. The Slayer looked back at Selene, at the gathered vampires and Lycans watching him from the rim. He gave a single, slow nod, an acknowledgement, a farewell. Then he turned, and without hesitation, leaped into the heart of the dimensional scar. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The Slayer's unique Argent energy signature, the essence of a god-killer, hitting the unstable rift while it was being forced open by an alien beam, was like throwing a lit match into a room filled with gasoline and oxygen. The scar detonated. A silent, white-out explosion consumed the beam, the lower section of the unseen ship, and the entire crater. There was no sound, only a flash that bleached the night sky white for an instant. When vision returned, the crystalline ship was reeling. A large section of its hull sheared away, glowing with internal damage. The dimensional scar was gone, sealed in a cataclysm of collapsed physics, and the ship hung lopsided in the air for a moment. Its voice, ragged and distorted, echoed once more. Contingency. Withdrawal. Specimen. Terminal. Data secured. We will return. With a final pained shimmer, the vessel shot upward, vanishing into the upper atmosphere, leaving only a fading violet afterglow. On the ground, the survivors picked themselves up. The crater was now a smooth, glassy bowl, fused by impossible heat. There was no sign of the Slayer. No body, no armor fragments, nothing. He was gone. Selene stood at the edge of the glass, staring into its depths. David joined her, placing a hand on her shoulder. Quint limped up beside them, his hybrid form receding. "Did he?" David started. "He closed the door," Selena said quietly, "and locked himself on the other side. With both of them." A profound silence settled over Prague. The demonic incursion was over. The alien hunters were driven off. The cost had been immense. Among the immortals, half who had fought were dead. But they had fought together, and they had survived. Thomas approached, his expression unreadable. He saved this world, twice. Once from what we are, and once from what we are not. Quint grunted, looking at the ashes of his fallen pack members mixed with demon dust. "We have a new enemy now, not each other, not just demons. Things from beyond the stars that see us as specimens." He looked at Selene. "That channel he gave us, it's still open. Silent, but open." Selena nodded. The encrypted frequency was a ghost channel now. A quiet hum in their ears where a synthetic voice might one day speak again. She looked up at the stars where the crystalline ship had vanished. "He's out there, somewhere, in hell or between places, and he's fighting." She turned to face the gathered survivors, vampire and Lycan, death dealer and pack warrior. "We have to be ready. When hell comes knocking again, or when the unseen return, we have to be stronger, together." It was not peace. It was an armistice forged in the fires of a greater war. The old hatreds remained, but they were overshadowed by a shared, chilling knowledge. They were not alone in the universe, and they were not at the top of the food chain. A new world order, born in a single, bloody night, guarded by the memory of a silent warrior in green armor who had, for a moment, made allies of monsters. In the desolate, fire-bleached plains of hell, A figure dragged itself from a smoldering crater of freshly cooled obsidian. The praetor's suit was dark, scarred, and cracked. One lens of the helmet was shattered, but within, a heartbeat thudded, slow and steady. The Doomslayer raised his head. Before him stretched the endless, damned landscapes of his oldest enemy. The skies burned with familiar fury. In the distance, the towers of a demonic citadel scraped the bloody clouds. But something was different. On the horizon, where the hellfire met the void, a patch of sky glimmered with a cold, violet light. A wound, an alien infection. The unseen had made their first cut. He pushed himself to his feet, the servos in his damaged armor groaning in protest. He reached to his back. The super shotgun was still there. He racked the slide. The sound echoed across the dead plain, a promise. He had a new war to fight, a war on two fronts, hell on one side, the cold harvesting void on the other. He was home, and he was not finished. The story of the Doomslayer in the Underworld universe ends not with a victory parade, but with a seismic shift. He arrived as an unstoppable force of nature, a divine hammer mistaking the complex nails of vampires and Lycans for the demons of his endless crusade. Through brutal error and unexpected empathy, sparked by the innocence of a child, he learned to discern true corruption from mere monstrous biology. In doing so, he didn't just avert a demonic invasion. He accidentally forged the first true alliance between two species locked in eternal war. The immortal factions of Earth, united by a greater horror, now stand as a reluctant planetary defense force, their old hatreds muted by the chilling knowledge of what lurks beyond the stars. The Slayer himself is gone, presumed dead in a cataclysm of his own making. But in the void between worlds or the pits of hell, the fight continues. He now battles on a new front, against an alien intelligence that sees both him and the demons as resources to be harvested. He has become the linchpin in a cosmic stalemate, holding the line against hell while simultaneously being the prize in a colder, more calculated hunt. On Earth, a ghost frequency remains open, a silent vigil kept by those who remember the green armor and the unyielding rage that saved them. The Underworld will never be the same. The night is darker, the threats are greater, but for the first time, the creatures of the night are not looking at each other with murderous intent. They are looking upward, weapons modified with demon bone and stolen tech, waiting and preparing. Because the multiverse is infinite, and more stories, more hunters, more wars most certainly await.